With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 12 o'clock on Friday, the 15th of March.
Work shy and overpaid. It's a bumper pay rise for MPs, but it's revealed they're clocking off earlier than ever.
Net zero NHS. Paramedics fear for patient safety as they warn new green ambulance plans could mean slower response times. The NHS stands accused of putting green credentials above medical priorities.
And don't try it on. A British aircraft carrier leads a NATO exercise in the Baltic Sea as Defence Secretary Grant Shapps warns Vladimir Putin, do not try it on. GB News has exclusive access.
Now, MPs. There are 650 of them, and their pay is shooting up to £91,400 a year. But are they doing less work for more money?
Yes, this is quite interesting. An analysis out this morning has shown that actually our MPs in this parliamentary session are clocking off earlier than before even New Labour. So in about 25 years, they're clocking off the shortest day they've had. So essentially what they're doing is working less for more money with this 5.5% pay increase.
Yeah, the House of Commons is rising now at about 4:30 in the afternoon. Now, people can remember back to some of the midnight sittings that MPs used to do. We're a long way away from that now. Late votes seem to be a thing of the past, and MPs can seemingly go back to their offices and put their feet up around 4:30.
I wonder if there is a Labour government, I wonder with all the stuff about flexible working and, you know, being able to bring your children to work.
They won't need to go to green benches at all.
They'll probably be working from home. Isn't that what Yvette Cooper said?
But the question is this value for money from our MPs? Less time in the Commons, less legislation going forward. We want to hear from you about what you think your MP is doing. Are they working hard enough? gbviews@gbnews.com. But we'll be getting to all of that and so much more after your news headlines.
Tom, thank you and good afternoon. The top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister has suffered a blow with another Tory MP announcing he won't run at the next general election. James Heappey is also expected to resign as Armed Forces Minister by the end of this month. GB News understands the decision is not over defence spending. Citing personal reasons, Mr Heappey says he's standing down to prioritise his family and to pursue a different career. More than 60 Tory MPs have now announced they're leaving the Commons as speculation continues to mount over when the general election will be held. The Prime Minister has ruled out the 2nd of May. Lib Dems leader Sir Ed Davey has accused him of running scared.
I think people are really fed up at this Conservative government and want to see the back of it. And the elections can't come quick enough for the Liberal Democrats and I think the people of our country. When those elections come, whenever Rishi Sunak decides to go to the palace, Liberal Democrats are ready. We've got fantastic candidates who are local champions in their areas. We're campaigning on things like the NHS and the need to tackle the crisis there, the cost of living and things like sewage.
Labour has accused the Prime Minister of being too chicken to call an election. As a result, a group of activists dressed as chickens clucked outside Downing Street, demanding the Prime Minister name the date now. Labour added Rishi Sunak needs to stop squatting in number 10. The Prime Minister is also under fresh pressure following reports his party has received a further £5 million from Frank Hester. The businessman has been accused of being racist after he allegedly said MP Diane Abbott made him want to hate all black women. Rishi Sunak's already facing calls to return a £10 million donation from Mr Hester. Following reports of a second load of cash, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says the Conservative Party is absolutely transparent when it comes to funding.
We absolutely are transparent. We follow all the rules, the regulations. We believe in that transparency. Many of the laws about it we actually passed ourselves, and the Conservative Party fully complies with all the requirements to be transparent about our donations.
Millions of pounds worth of drugs and 8 XL bullies have been seized during county lines raids. Hundreds of weapons were also found, including Rambo knives and machetes. Every police force across the country took part in the raids last week, resulting in more than 1,800 arrests. Phone lines used to distribute drugs from cities to towns and villages were also shut down. Former Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville told GBNews the crackdown still doesn't solve the wider problem.
Drugs trade is like the Greek story of the Hydra. You cut one head off and 2 more grow in its place. And what's really frightening with county lines is how they use children. And the reason they use children is because the police were very successful with undercover officers who are obviously adults. And so the drug dealers don't trust anybody they don't know who's an adult, but they well know that the police are not allowed to use children as some kind of undercover agent.
The Defence Secretary has warned Russia's president not to try it on while he was on a NATO visit in Eastern Europe. GBNews has been given exclusive access to a training exercise in Poland where British forces are working with their allies, preparing for any possible attack by Russia. It's part of Steadfast Defender, the largest military exercise since the Cold War. Grant Shapp says NATO allies are ready and
operate with other countries like Poland and be interoperable. Most importantly of all, sending a very clear signal to Putin or any other despotic leader that we will stand up for ourselves and don't try it on.
Meanwhile, voting's underway in Russia to elect the country's next president. Ballots are being cast over 3 days, even though Vladimir Putin is all but certain to win. He appealed to voters yesterday, including in annexed parts of Ukraine, to be united in determining his country's future. Ukraine says any Russian vote in the Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson regions will be void. Hamas is said to be moving towards a truce deal, but Israel's Prime Minister says the terror group's list of demands are unrealistic. Thousands of people staged a demonstration in Tel Aviv last night demanding the immediate release of hostages from Gaza. According to news agency Reuters, Hamas has presented a ceasefire proposal, which includes releasing some Israeli women, children and the elderly, in exchange for the freedom of Palestinian prisoners, 100 of which are currently serving life sentences. The Duke of Sussex and Prince of Wales made separate addresses honouring their mother at the Diana Legacy Awards last night. At the charity's 25th anniversary, the Prince said his mother taught him that everyone has the potential to give something back. He told the audience that he and his wife, the Princess of Wales, have sought to focus on Diana's legacy through their work. Prince William attended the event in person, while the Duke of Sussex dialed in virtually from California.
I am seriously impressed with the work that you do, especially at the young age that you're at. And the future's yours, right? And you're helping to shape that future. That's why you've been chosen, and that's why you've been given these awards. So my mum would be incredibly proud of all the work that you've done. I'm incredibly proud, and thank you for doing everything that you do.
McDonald's has been forced to apologise to its customers after it was hit by an IT fault. Restaurants were affected globally, but the issue has now been resolved in the UK and Ireland. The company blamed the issue on a technology outage, confirming there are no cybersecurity issues. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom.
Right, well, it's 12:08 and pay will rise to more than £90,000 for MPs after the Parliamentary watchdog raised their salaries by an inflation-busting 5.5%, meaning their pay will increase by nearly £5,000 next year.
This comes as it's been reported that the working day for an MP in the House of Commons has averaged just 7 hours and 9 minutes in the last 3 months, a record low since Labour came into power in '97.
Yes, and the Labour Party is saying that this is proof that Rishi Sunak has run out of steam and that the Parliament has run out of steam and it's time for a change. But let's see what our political editor, Christopher Hope, makes of this all. Are our politicians being paid more to do less?
Hi, Tom. Hi, Emily. Yeah, you could say that. They are now at a 25-year low in their working day in the House of Commons. Around I think it's nearly 8 hours a day they're being paid for sitting days. Of course, they're not here for around half the year. They have long summer holidays, Easter breaks, Whitsun breaks, so it goes on. They're not here often on Fridays, but today is a sitting day. I can report to you that the Prime Minister will accept the 5.5% pay rise, along with all MPs. That takes the MP's pay to £91,346. But that's not the end of it, because if you're a minister, you get another £67,000 for the cabinet ministers, down to £22,000 a year from the most junior. The PM's pay goes up to £166,000. His top-up is £75,000 extra. If you're Keir Starmer, you get nearly £50,000 extra on top of your MP's pay. Select Committee chairman, they get an extra £17,000 a year. And all this has a bearing on the payoffs given to MPs like James Heapy when they leave Parliament at the election. They're getting 4 months net pay, not 2 months net pay. And that means that after today's increase, they'll get £20,000 just to stop being an MP. It's a lot of money. That doesn't include the pension they get, which is, of course, substantial and is guaranteed by the state forever. Yeah, I mean, there's a debate to be had here, I think. I can remember back to the day when MPs voted on their pay rises shortly around before and after the MP expenses scandal at the Telegraph, and that brought in this new idea that it was set independently. So in the lobby meeting just now with the Prime Minister's spokesman, he made very clear that the level is set by IPSA. It's 5.5%. It's more than CPI inflation at 4%. It's nearly twice the rate last year, which is 2.9%. But IPSA do it, independent of Parliament and MPs. So MPs, even like a millionaire like Rishi Sunak, he's accepting that pay rise.
But Christopher Hope, do correct me if I'm wrong. I believe the way that IPSA work this out is based on public sector pay awards. So it's because nurses are getting more, and because doctors are getting more, and because policemen are getting more, and because all of these public sector pay workers are getting more. On average, they're getting 5.5% more. So that's what MPs get. Isn't that how it works?
That is how IPSA did it, yeah, Tom. That they normally look at the inflation rate in September. I think it was from memory, it was a lot more than now. So they take a range, but they are trying to benchmark it against other public sector pay deals. They want MPs to be in the middle of that to try and take the heat out of it. There was a time when David Cameron, as leader of the Tories in opposition, refused to accept the pay rise, wouldn't vote for it, told his MPs not to. Number 10 make very clear that the ministerial top-up on MP salaries has been frozen for many years now, but that in other ways, though, MPs are getting richer. Some would say, though, they're not being paid enough. 91,000 isn't enough to get a decent calibre person in who can vote on laws.
Well, that's true, Christopher. Lots of people getting in touch, a few people, let's say, getting in touch saying they think that MPs actually deserve more money and perhaps they'd be less useless if they were paid more. That's their words, not mine. But, Christopher, a lot of Tory MPs, another one bites the dust. James Heapy, Armed Forces Minister, doesn't fancy running again.
Yeah, James Heapy, a very respected armed forces minister, former serviceman himself. He's the 61st Tory MP to stand down. 1 in 6 Tory MPs elected in 19 are now leaving. I think the comparison we should make is to the 2015 election. That was the last planned election. The previous 2 in 17 and 19 were surprise elections. So MPs can plan for this election, and that's why you see more people planning to leave. Also, Tory MPs are way behind the polls. That's part of it. He was selected for Mendip Hills, Wells and Mendip Hills Conservative Association. That's a new seat, so his old seat was being divided into 4. Roughly, I think, a notional majority of 10,000. He's in his 40s. He wants to change, but he's a decent man. I think he'll be well missed.
No, certainly, and to follow on from Brandon Lewis's resignation as well, it seems that there are lots and lots of people leaving. But, Christopher, you have some news yourself about a new podcast you're launching here on GB News.
Thanks, Tom. That's right. It's called Chopper's Political Podcast. My nickname is Chopper. Goes back to an old email address I had when I was at the Scotsman at the turn of the century. See Hope. But, yeah, we're going to interview pop stars and politicians in a local pub in Westminster, trying to get the inside track, the inside scoop for any viewers and listeners who want to tune in. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our website, gbnews.com, and YouTube. It's a good listen. This week, we've started with a bang. Holly Valance. Now, she, of course, was the pop star, the Neighbours star, the Kiss Kiss star. She starred in the Taken films with Liam Neeson. She emerged, didn't she, as this kind of new person backing right-wing policies at the PopCon event last month. And so she's quite interesting. And she's going to be giving us her first interview for about a decade. And here's what she had to say about Nigel Farage.
Last time I voted Conservatives. Next time I'll be voting Reform.
Really?
Yeah.
You're at heart.
Well, I think the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And I'm sure as hell not going to Labour.
Well, there you go. There's a little taste of what's to come. Pop stars and politicians. Good stuff. Thank you very much. Showing range, as always. Christopher Hope, great to speak to you, our political editor there.
Now, I wonder, have there ever been any politicians who've turned into pop stars? There was the band MP4 back in the early 2010s, which was made up of 4 MPs. But I think they might have, some of them might have lost their seats in the intervening years and it might have gone by the wayside.
And we should say, just about the MPs, of course, they do other work, not just in the Commons. So, you know, they do lots of work with their constituents and other interests, and lots of things are going on as well. But it is quite telling that actually that time in the Commons making legislation is at a bit of a record low.
But in other news, an inner London council will remove Palestinian flags from its infrastructure after receiving hundreds of complaints from residents, including Jewish people distressed by their presence.
Yes, so Tower Hamlets in East London originally decided against removing the flags. They've been hung up on lampposts and in high streets so as not to destabilise community cohesion. But residents protested and the group UK Lawyers for Israel threatened legal action unless they removed them.
Well, the Member of Parliament Paul Scully was last month accused of Islamophobia for claiming there were no-go areas in parts of London, particularly perhaps in Tower Hamlets. He name-checked that area specifically and joins us now. Now, Paul, you made these sort of claims, you clarified those claims the next day, but I suppose instances like this, where the Tower Hamlets Council has had to be on the receiving end of legal action over these flags, not on private property, but on public property, to some extent you must be feeling a bit vindicated.
Yeah, I think it does vindicate the position as I actually meant. So not that people can't go into any areas of the UK, including Tower Hamlets, but they feel really uncomfortable, often because of some preset prejudices that are because of a tiny minority of people. I actually ran through, I'm training for the London Marathon, and I ran up through from Westminster to the North Circular and back through Whitechapel. I joked I was going through a go area because it was tearing through, but I saw all the Palestinian flags there, and you can imagine, if you are a Jewish person, how you might feel intimidated with that. If you were a gay person working hand in hand with your partner, you may feel intimidated by these things. So the wider point is actually getting to know why people feel daunted by that, and actually how you can tackle that. So getting rid of these, I think, is a good move, because community cohesion is complex. You can't deal with it in a little soundbite on social media with a frenzy that follows.
I mean, Paul, it doesn't sound like the mayor of Tower Hamlets did this because he felt it was the right thing to do. It's because he was threatened with legal action for allowing these flags to be everywhere. I guess for most people, having any foreign flag all over your high street in Britain, as opposed to, I guess, the Union flag, could be an irritant, at the very least, to most residents. I mean, or do you think the majority of people in Tower Hamlets were probably quite happy? Do you imagine there'll be quite an uproar over this decision?
Well, there might be by some community groups. You know, there is obviously a big Muslim population, a Bangladeshi population in particular, in Tower Hamlets, who have expressed concern for people of Gazans, the Palestinians that are losing their lives, and that's absolutely to be commended. But it should not be at the expense of that wider community cohesion, because otherwise, all you're doing is bringing that sort of you're importing the tensions from.
But the mayor thought initially that removing the flags would destabilise community cohesion. So that shows perhaps how much of the community were quite happy for these flags to be around the area.
Yeah, look, but we saw, didn't we, a few months ago, all the pictures of hostages getting ripped up and these kind of things. So people should be able to express their opinions, but they have to realise that the whole point about Tower Hamlets, the whole point about London, it is a melting pot of a mixture of people, live and let live, and we should therefore respect each other rather than, you know, bottoming down to that sort of that single thing with the Palestinian flags, which makes some people feel very uncomfortable.
Well, Paul Scully, Member of Parliament for now for Sutton-on-Cheam. I know you're one of the many Conservatives standing down at the next election, but thank you very much for your time and your thoughts on this issue.
Thank you. Well, you are, of course, watching and listening to GB News, but coming up, concerns patients will be forced to wait longer for ambulances to arrive as the NHS is set to introduce more electric ambulances. Is this net zero madness, and could it be putting green credentials over patient safety?
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
Is the debate on gender really a far-right issue?
Far right. I'm so bored of that phrase, you know what I mean? Like, anyone who talks about, anyone who acknowledges that there are two sexes is suddenly far right, because that's what Hitler and Mussolini were all about. This question from Shirley is, of course, about Labour. They've been accused of being undemocratic because they pressured a pub into cancelling a debate, and this debate features Kelly J. Keane, who's been on this show a couple of times, and she's a campaigner, and she was just on the panel, and then they got a letter saying that they couldn't do it because Kelly J. Keane apparently attracts far-right groups. Now, they've tried this trick before, but because some awful, ghastly neo-Nazi types turned up near to an event that she was holding in Australia, they kind of tried to blame that on her and suggest that the two were the same thing. They weren't. That was an opportunistic group turning up to... They're not... Neo-Nazis aren't pro-feminist. They're not pro an event called Let Women Speak. That's just ridiculous.
New Zealand's TV blurred her touching her zip because they said that her touching her zip was a far-right dog whistle because she's making that symbol.
Yeah, but she wasn't making the symbol, she was just adjusting a zip.
Yeah,
and
also, this isn't a far-right symbol.
I mean, that was incredible because she obviously wasn't making that symbol anyway. She was just adjusting a top. But this New Zealand news channel blurred out the hand so that they could pretend that it was some horrible ghastly... I mean, this is learning stuff, isn't it?
She's talked about having voted Labour in the past. She's
so not far right.
But also,
I mean,
even if she were right-wing, which she
Yes.
isn't, why would they be banning a panel where there's a discussion about one of the most important issues of our day? What are Labour playing at here?
They're anti-democratic, aren't they? They're just kind of playing whack-a-mole with things they don't like. I think maybe I'll write to the pub and say I do want to see Kelly J. Keane there.
Yeah, but they won't listen to you
Well,
if
no,
you say
they
that,
won't,
will
they
they? Because
won't.
you've got the unfashionable opinion, Chris.
Well, I'm the unfashionable workplace.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 24 minutes past 12 and paramedics fear patients will be forced to wait longer for ambulances to arrive.
Yes, NHS is set to introduce electric ambulances, raising concerns that the drive for net zero may be putting patient safety at risk. A test group found the electric ambulances took up to 4 hours to charge and travelled only an average of 70 miles.
Well, joining us now is consultant oncologist and former director of the World Health Organization Cancer Programme, Professor Carol Sikora. Now, Professor, this seems to be a big drive, but, if you'll pardon the pun, but frankly, there are some concerns that the technology isn't quite where we'd want it to be in terms of charging hubs and range, really, of these new ambulances, particularly perhaps for rural areas?
I think it's perfectly predictable. That's the problem. You can work out the downtime of an electric vehicle compared to a petrol vehicle. So I don't see how this could happen. It means you have to have more vehicles, you have to have more staff and all the rest of it. If you're not prepared to do that, and I would suggest this is not the time to be doing it because of huge problems the NHS has. The net zero for the NHS is not about just transport by car. It's about how hospitals run, how the very dated estate of the NHS is used optimally. And it takes time, people's time away from what's really important, clearing the backlogs. 7.8 million, whatever the figure, it's probably 10 million in reality, are waiting for something. Let's get that sorted and then do the luxuries like this.
Well, you raise a very good point. I'm struck firstly, I didn't know that that NHS England had a greener NHS team. Apparently, the combined salary bill of this green team is £3 million a year. 48 roles have been made, and essentially, lots of decisions have to tick a green box if they're to be made. It seems there's so much bureaucracy going on. It says no decision can be taken without a product's social values and contribution to emissions targets being considered. Why on earth is the NHS worrying about its carbon footprint when, as we say, we've got record waiting lists?
I know. You give up in the end. Every time you do anything, you have to make a business case for something. You have to say how green it is to show that you're actually observing. Now, it can be tokenism, but if you're going to do it properly, you're going to have to hire people to advise you. You're going to have hired people to judge the business proposals to see how green. Now, this is great if we're really performing well, as many European health services are. They're performing very well. We're not. No one can say the NHS is performing well at the current time. The people are great. There's nothing wrong with the clinical front line. They're fabulous. They're polite. They're empathic. They're competent and skilled. But the problem is the whole organisation is sick. And just putting another 50% of money into it would do no good whatsoever.
Especially, I suppose, if that... if that extra money is going to perhaps, and there have been tens of thousands more nurses, but if they're spending an ever larger proportion of their time filling out forms and ticking boxes and making the green case, the business case for various forms of medicine and treatment, then it doesn't matter how many more nurses you have, because so much less of their time is with the patients.
Getting the front line, just doing frontline tasks is so important, and that's been forgotten about. You know, if you're managing a supermarket, you would want to make sure that patients can access what they want in an orderly way and get to the till and get out quickly. That's what supermarket managers do. We don't have that effect in the NHS. It's just so slow.
Professor Sikora, is what you're saying here that actually getting rid of all of these middle managers was a bad thing? We need a certain level of middle management to do the form filling so that the clinical staff can work on the wards.
I know. And the trouble with middle management, you have middle managers filling the forms and middle management assessing the forms. So you've just got a double system, and it just burgeons, just grows and grows every year. And it's the same with the diversity. It's exactly the same. You know, you have all the graduates paid $100,000 a year to come and develop a job and trouble people like me, you know, with forms to fill and looking at everything you do in a different light. Sure, we've got to respect green and we've got to respect diversity. There's no problem with that. But we don't need an army of bureaucrats. No other business organization would do that. They just do it naturally. The managers are empowered to take action and do it.
Well, thank you very much indeed for talking to us, Professor Carol Sikora. Great to get your view on all of this. I mean, Tom, from next month, every NHS supplier, so any company or whatever that sells a product, a medicine, a machine, will have to draw up a carbon reduction plan. I mean, seriously.
So this isn't just the NHS dragging itself down and building its costs up because of its own regulation. This is now the NHS exporting its regulation to the private sector. If you want to do business with the NHS, you have to lumber your business with as much bureaucracy as they have.
So if I want to sell a particular medicine to the NHS or an asthma inhaler or a particular type of pen to the NHS, because it could be down to the pens they use, I have to fill in a carbon reduction plan.
And do you know what that means? It won't be the cheapest pens or the best value for money pens being sold and therefore saving the NHS money and therefore saving the taxpayer money. It'll be the asthma inhalers or whatever that come from the company that has the big compliance department that probably adds an extra 50% onto the price of its product that then the taxpayer has to lump out for. This is cost upon cost upon cost.
Well, there's a question for you at home. Should the NHS be spending £3 million on a green team? I mean, I didn't even know the NHS had a net zero team, but there you go. Of course it does. What part of government doesn't? Anyway.
Yes, Meghan Markle has been facing criticism once again as she's slammed for launching a new lifestyle brand precisely at the same time as Prince William was speaking at the Diana Legacy Award.
Yes. Let's get your headlines.
Emily, thank you. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has suffered a blow with another Tory MP announcing he won't run at the next general election. James Heappey is also expected to resign as Armed Forces Minister by the end of this month. GB News understands the decision is not over defence spending. Citing personal reasons, Mr Heappey says he's standing down to prioritise his family and to pursue a different career. More than 60 Tory MPs have now announced they're leaving the Commons at the next election. The Prime Minister's also under fresh pressure following reports his party has received a further £5 million from Frank Hester. The businessman has been accused of being racist after he allegedly said MP Diane Abbott made him want to hate all black women. Rishi Sunak's already facing calls to return a £10 million donation from Mr Hester on reports of a second sum of cash. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt says the Conservative Party is absolutely transparent when it comes to declaring funds. Millions of pounds worth of drugs and 8 XL bullies have been seized during County Lines raids. Hundreds of weapons were also found, including Rambo knives and machetes. Every police force across the country took part in the raids last week, resulting in more than 1,800 arrests. The Defence Secretary is warning Russia's president not to try it on while he was on a NATO visit in Eastern Europe. GB News was given exclusive access to a training exercise in Poland where British forces are working with their allies, preparing for any possible attack by Russia. It's part of Steadfast Defender, the largest military exercise since the Cold War. Grant Shapps says NATO members are ready and willing to protect themselves from any threat. McDonald's has been forced to apologise to customers after it was hit by an IT fault. Restaurants were affected globally, but the issue has now been resolved in the UK and Ireland. The company blamed the issue on a technology outage, confirming there are no cybersecurity issues. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 p.m.
Our first question comes from Elliot. Elliot, hello.
Is Canada now an authoritarian state?
Elliot, I think it's been an authoritarian state for a while. I mean, under Trudeau. This is a new thing now, and this is coming from the Justice Minister, who has Arif Virani, and he has defended this new power for their online harms bill. That sounds familiar. We've got something quite similar. And they're saying they can now impose house arrest on someone who they think might commit a hate crime in the future, right? That's scary stuff, isn't it?
There's obviously a very dark side to this, because you can't, or in my opinion, you shouldn't be able to imprison somebody before they've done anything.
Right.
Well, it is Canada, and I know you in this country, you kind of respect Canada as a country. America didn't even know it was a country until recently, and I think that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to show themselves to be different than America.
I think America has a responsibility to invade. You know what? I do.
You know, you're kidding, but it may come down to this, or this may just be yeah, maybe.
Well, I just think it's ridiculous that the idea of arresting someone... I mean, our government's bad enough, and the Scottish government's out of control, the Irish government's out of control. They're all talking about... I mean, the Irish government's got a new hate crimes bill where they're talking about they can seize your phone if they suspect you might have some material that could potentially stir up hatred. I mean, for God's sake, what does that mean? Your phone's full of that kind of thing.
Well, the government knows that.
Yeah.
But you're right. But it has to do with the bigger picture, which is Canada has sucked itself in on the big team world. Sorry, I'm going to say it. It's big team world. And what they're doing, this is not even a free speech issue. This is just about silencing dissent against the Canadian government. It has nothing to do with openness and talk, whatever. It's like saying, we don't want these people to spread their opinions.
Dangerous opinions. That's what speech codes and hate speech laws always do.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 36 minutes past midday, and earlier on, we brought you the story about Tower Hamlets Council removing Palestinian flags from infrastructure in their borough. Well, Lutfi Rahman, the mayor of Tower Hamlets, has said that these flags are symbols of solidarity and sympathy for those enduring extreme suffering in Gaza. We must not forget that over 30,000 people have now been killed, 70% of whom are women and children. Although it must be said those are figures from Hamas rather than independently verified. The flags certainly had an impact and made residents' views clear. That's what Lutfi Rahman had to say.
Yet they're taking them down. Yeah. Anyway, Prince William and Harry couldn't bring themselves to share the same stage at their Mum's Tribute Awards last night. Prince William went first.
Evening's Legacy Award
is particularly special as it marks the 25th anniversary year of the Diana Award. She taught me that everyone has the potential to give something back, that everyone in need deserves a supporting hand in life. That legacy is something that both Catherine and I sought to focus on through our work.
Then separately, Harry gave a message by video call, but only after his brother had already left the event.
I'm seriously impressed with the work that you do, especially at the young age that you're at. And the future's yours. That's why you've been chosen, and that's why you've been given these awards. So my mum would be incredibly proud of all the work that you've done. I'm incredibly proud, and thank you for doing everything that you do.
Oh, well, just moments before the ceremony began, Meghan Markle launched her lifestyle brand on Instagram.
I wish you bluebirds in the spring to give your heart a song to sing, and then a kiss. But more than this, I wish you love.
I do like that song, to be fair.
The Duchess of Sussex has launched American Riviera, what's it called? American Riviera Orchard. Peculiar. But is this coincidence, or is the timing of this launch a calculated move from Meghan? Well, let's get the detail now with our royal correspondent Cameron Walker to take us through everything that happened last night. And Cameron, first of all, can you just set the scene, the context? What was this award?
Yeah, so this was the Diana Legacy Awards. The Diana Award was set up in 25 years ago, empowering the message that Diana had, which was young people have the power to change the world. And they've done an award ceremony every year since 2017. Back in 2017, Prince Harry and William appeared on the stage together to give the awards to the 20 or so young people receiving them. But of course, this year, totally different. OK, logistically, Prince Harry is the other side of the world, but the fact that he couldn't even appear on a video call, or William, or on the other hand, William was unwilling to appear on the stage at the same time his brother was on a video call, I think speaks volumes here. Clearly, the rift is still there, because it would have been perfectly possible for them both to virtually appear on the stage at the same time. But Prince Harry's contribution did not happen until William had left the building. So if that wasn't going to overshadow the whole event, bearing in mind this is to honour the legacy of their late mother, then perhaps what happened with Meghan and now before certainly will. But Prince William also made a joke about, well, revealed that his son, Prince George's favourite song, I'm going to have to say this, was Thunderstruck by AC/DC. That's the song that Prince William kind of marched onto the stage with. So he appeared to be having fun, despite the fact his brother was going to appear an hour or so later.
Interesting stuff. But perhaps the bigger story here, rather than the unsynchronous nature of the event, was what Meghan was doing, all while this was taking place.
Yeah, so when it dropped on Instagram last night, Tom, I actually didn't think it was real. And I was just thinking, God, seriously? And I contacted Meghan's office and they confirmed to me that it was legit. This is Meghan's new lifestyle blog. To be fair to Meghan, she has a track record in a very successful lifestyle blog, which was The Tig, before she got engaged to Prince Harry, which it kind of shut down in 2017 because she got engaged to Prince Harry. But it did make her a lot of money. And clearly she's got a new agent in Hollywood, WME, and they are clearly, well, appear to be trying to rebrand Meghan. Opinion polls on both sides of the Atlantic, not great at the minute, and this is something she could perhaps potentially capitalise on. A very glossy website, a very glossy Instagram page, potential for lots of brand deals. But the timing is suspicious, because if it was just Prince William appearing at the Diana Awards, I would have put it down to Kensington Palace and Archewell not communicating with each other. But they clearly knew that it was happening because Prince Harry was appearing at the awards. So therefore, it would have been in the diary. And that is, I mean, people can draw their own conclusions, but it is a very suspicious, I suppose, timing of the launch of this.
It's also a bit jarring. I mean, when I saw you post about this last night, I clicked straight onto it to see the Instagram page, and she's very much branding herself, her whole identity, as being the Duchess of Sussex, which seems slightly jarring with the tag name American Riviera Orchard. So it just says American Riviera Orchard by Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, established 2024. And I'm just wondering, could there possibly be an issue here? Because she's using the Duchess of Sussex, and this is very much a money-making scheme, is it not, this blog? I mean, presumably it's all about, as you say, doing business with other companies, influencing people to buy certain products, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's a grey area. The only official rules that were given at that so-called Sandringham summit was that they couldn't capitalise on the word royal. Harry and Meghan left the royal family, so they could pursue their own commercial endeavours, which is what we're seeing now with this blog. Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, is her legal title. I think her team would argue that she is perfectly entitled to use it. I think many people would see it that it's a bit unfair that she is using that title to make her own money, but of course there's no rules stopping her from doing that, and it probably will make the whole blog more commercially viable, because it does have that subtle link back to her royal past. But nonetheless, I think people will be looking at Meghan, Duchess of Sussex on the top of the website and thinking, I thought you didn't want to be part of the royal family.
I thought you weren't allowed to use your royal title for commercial gain. I thought that was the issue.
Is that just an HRH?
But she's not capitalising on the royal title. She's capitalising on the American Riviera orchard, and her name is Meghan, Duchess of Sussex. That just simply is what it is. So that's what they would argue.
Yeah. Well, Cameron Walker, thank you so much for joining us and talking us through what is just a bafflingly petty timing of a launch. I can't understand how these people sort of find the timing to do things in order to annoy each other. It's so childish.
Also, it's not a coincidence. They'll have calendars, they'll have, you know, red flags, amber flags for when dates clash and things like this, so they don't launch things without knowing what else is happening that day. They'll have people very much micromanaging this from the start. They will have known for months that this was the day she was launching this. They will have known for months that this was Diana's Legacy Awards Day too. So these aren't coincidences, I don't think.
They're playing their games, and that's what rich people do. But GB News reporter Ray Addison, in other news, was given exclusive access to a NATO training exercise in Poland, and his plane was targeted by Russia. More on that very soon.
Hello again, I'm here with your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Today's showers are largely going to ease as we go through later today, taking us into a bit of a chilly night because the low pressure centre that has brought some blustery and showery weather today is clearing away towards the northeast with a bit of a ridge of high pressure building from the west. Yes, there will still be some showers as we go through the end of the afternoon, particularly across eastern parts, but turning drier and clearer from the west, and with clear skies and a bit of a northerly wind, we're likely to see our temperatures dropping tonight. It will be chillier than it has been through some recent nights. Could dip just a bit below freezing across northern parts, a touch of frost possible. Elsewhere, there may be a few pockets of mist and fog. Otherwise, though, Saturday gets off to a fine start for many areas, and across the north and east, we're going to hold on to the blue, sunny skies through much of the day. But in the south and west here, it will turn increasingly cloudy, and there'll be some wet weather at times too, with something a bit more persistent and heavy rain-wise pushing into Northern Ireland later. Temperatures will be lifting as we go through the day, so after a chilly start, we should see highs quite widely in the low to mid-teens Celsius. Wet weather then pushes its way through as we go through Saturday night into Sunday, clearing away towards the east, and so Sunday itself actually looks largely dry for many places, albeit with a scattering of showers, and there'll be some strong winds too. Monday should be mostly dry, just a few showers to watch out for before some more rain arrives on Tuesday. That's it for me. I'll see you later.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Earlier on breakfast.
You might have thought this is the time to sort of get ready for a spring election, but it is not going to happen, is it?
Well, I think Rishi Sunak is running scared, isn't he? And I think it's a real shame because people around the country are sick and tired of this Conservative government.
People deserve to have that choice. They have the, they deserve to be able to vote for the change that they want.
Just do not see in the Sussex world how that wouldn't have come up with a bit of an amber flag.
Alex, are you, as Anne says, a lazy snowflake? From 6, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 10 to 1, and the Royal Air Force launches a major mission to find Russian cyber hackers who jammed a plane carrying not only the Defence Secretary, but also, more importantly, our reporter, Ray Addison.
Our very own Ray Addison. Now, lasting 30 minutes, the attack took out one of the primary navigation systems as the RAF jet flew close to the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad in the Baltic Sea.
This took place just after GB News reporter Ray Addison was given exclusive access to a NATO training exercise in Poland.
They move from room to room. Breaching. Clearing. These NATO soldiers may not speak the same language, but they are fluent in the art of urban warfare, working together to neutralise the enemy. And as the tip of the spear, they're ready to roll against Russia in a matter of hours. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Hawes is in command.
My major observation is soldiers are soldiers, and no matter what language they speak, we all understand the NATO drills that we have to go through, and we've been able to, after a very short period of practice, execute some very complex operations.
This is just the latest exercise involving British troops. Defence Secretary Grant Shapps is here to show his support.
I would say back home most people are unaware of this enormous NATO exercise. Not just large, the biggest since the Cold War.
20,000 are taking part in Operation Steadfast Defender, with another 70,000 from all 32 NATO allies. It's designed to send a very clear message to the Russian president. Don't push us too far.
Putin's endgame is to carry on expanding Russia. You don't have to take my word for it. It's what he's said himself many times. NATO isn't trying to expand into other people's territory. We are simply here to defend our values of freedom and sovereignty and democracy. We should be proud of what these guys have been doing here, making sure we can exercise together. Most importantly of all, sending a very clear signal to Putin or any other despotic leader that we will stand up for ourselves and don't try it on.
With Russia's war in Ukraine now in its third year, the Defence Secretary is urging Western allies not to get fatigued, but to treat Putin's ongoing invasion as a wake-up call, a message that we must have the resolve to spend what is required on defence. If not, it will only embolden those who may wish to test our resolve. Meanwhile, these NATO forces stand ready to deploy within 48 hours.
Though no NATO country wants war, Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine has reminded the West that it can never show weakness. And there is certainly strength in numbers. Ray Addison, GB News.
Bit of a scary shot there, Defence Secretary with a gun pointing right at me. What have I done, Grant?
I was going to say it was a fantastic shot, but yeah, I take your point. A little bit intimidating, perhaps, but good stuff. What a fantastic report from Ray there.
Yeah, no.
Very lucky to get that access. Very interesting indeed.
Absolutely, and in the context of those signals being jammed from Russia. Some really concerning stuff there.
Absolutely. I want to get to some of your views because you've been sending in them thick and fast. What should we start with?
Well, Maureen has written in on MPs' pay. She says, it's not MPs' salary that I think is too much, but the amounts that are paid to those in the House of Lords. They can claim up to £300 a day, plus half of them are nodding off and half are sitting in a daze if you ever watch them. And they can block new laws they weren't even voted for. I call that undemocratic. So, Maureen, more worried about their peers in the House of Lords than the MPs on the green benches.
I think that's a good point, to be fair. Stephen says all MPs should not get paid. They should be an MP because they want to help their area, not their bank balance. Well, I think that would be a bit tricky. I think they have to have some kind of compensation.
It used to be the case, though.
Yeah,
up until the 1940s, I think it was, MPs did not get paid at all. And it was actually one of the things that Margaret Thatcher said is that she couldn't have become an MP until MPs started getting paid. She was very clear about this. People from her background, you know,
Should we just have the, all MPs being rich poshos so they can afford to do the job without getting paid? I guess it's all about social mobility and making sure we have diversity in our MPs. On the issue of the NHS and its net zero drive, Tom says, hi, I was a paramedic in the NHS for 20 years and can categorically say that electric ambulances will be inappropriate purely due to the fact that ambulances today are such power-intensive units. He goes on to say they all have electrical systems inside, ECGs, datacom systems, suction unions, airlift bags, AC systems. That is a very, very good point. It's not just the actual travel that zaps that electricity, it's everything that's inside too that's needed to save lives.
They'll have to have the most enormous batteries known to man. But I do have to say, on the pro-electric vehicle side of things, these things do 0 to 60 faster than just about anything else that humans drive. They are incredibly quick. Yeah, the speed of acceleration on an electric vehicle compared to an internal combustion engine vehicle. I mean, if you've ever
I'm not sure that's true.
It's completely true.
I'm not sure that's true.
So quick. They are so quick. I mean, it's 0 to 60.
Do they drive electric on the F1?
There is. There's E1. I've seen an E1 car. They're spectacular.
Well, thank you for keeping your views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com is the address, of course. That's all we have time for this hour, but coming up in the next hour, we'll be debating whether the NHS is prioritising net zero over patients. You'll stay tuned for that.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, I'm here with your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Today's showers are largely going to ease as we go through later today, taking us into a bit of a chilly night because the low pressure centre that has brought some blustery and showery weather today is clearing away towards the northeast with a bit of a ridge of high pressure building from the west. Yes, there will still be some showers as we go through the end of the afternoon, particularly across eastern parts, but turning drier and clearer from the west, and with clear skies and a bit of a northerly wind, we're likely to see our temperatures dropping tonight. It will be chillier than it has been through some recent nights. Could dip just a bit below freezing across northern parts, a touch of frost possible. Elsewhere, there may be a few pockets of mist and fog. Otherwise, though, Saturday gets off to a fine start for many areas, and across the north and east, we're going to hold on to the blue, sunny skies through much of the day. But in the south and west here, it will turn increasingly cloudy, and there'll be some wet weather at times too, with something a bit more persistent and heavy rain-wise pushing into Northern Ireland later. Temperatures will be lifting as we go through the day, so after a chilly start, we should see highs quite widely in the low to mid-teens Celsius. Wet weather then pushes its way through as we go through Saturday night into Sunday, clearing away towards the east, and so Sunday itself actually looks largely dry for many places, albeit with a scattering of showers, and there'll be some strong winds too. Monday should be mostly dry, just a few showers to watch out for before some more rain arrives on Tuesday. That's it for me. I'll see you later.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've got cash, treats and a spring shopping spree to be won in a great British giveaway. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash. Plus, there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 1 o'clock on Friday, the 15th of March. In unison.
Work shy and overpaid. It's a bumper pay rise for MPs, as it's revealed they're clocking off earlier than ever.
Net zero NHS. Paramedics fear for patient safety as they warn new green ambulance plans could mean slower response times. The NHS stands accused of putting green credentials above medical priorities.
And Palestine flag row. Tower Hamlets Council have been pressured to remove flags from their own infrastructure after receiving hundreds of complaints from residents. We'll speak to a local councillor for his thoughts.
Right, well, should the NHS be prioritising net zero, climate change, their green credentials, over what's best for patients? That's the question, really, isn't it? It's been revealed that the NHS is spending an awful lot on making it to net zero, making sure everything that they do isn't carbon intensive.
But not just everything that the NHS do. So swapping out the ambulances for electric ones and having all of these new jobs on climate-focused responsibilities, but also making sure that their supply chains meet all of their criteria as well, meaning they're not going to be buying necessarily the most cost-effective drugs. They're going to be buying the drugs that come from companies that are the best on climate change.
So if I want to sell a syringe, or, hundreds of thousands of syringes to the NHS, I will have to fill in probably countless forms, about how I'm reducing my carbon to be able to make these green-friendly syringes. And I do wonder whether that is a good use of time for suppliers, whether it's pushing up costs on the NHS and therefore the taxpayer, and whether things like electric ambulances actually are the best product for people who are in desperate need of help, medical attention.
Since 2010, the amount of cash, inflation adjusted that is, the amount of money going into the NHS has increased by a third. But it doesn't feel like it has. And I wonder how much of that cash is going on initiatives like this, form-filling responsibilities, more expensive purchasing because of these sorts of initiatives.
Well, maybe you think at home that the NHS can do both. It can be green and it can also pay attention to medical priorities. Let us know what you think. Do you think the NHS is right to prioritise net zero? But there you go. Let's get your headlines.
Emily, thank you very much, and good afternoon. The top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has suffered a blow with another Tory MP announcing he won't run at the next general election. Citing personal reasons, James Heappey says he's standing down to prioritise his family and to pursue a different career. Downing Street says he'll be greatly missed in Parliament. He's also expected to resign as Armed Forces Minister by the end of this month. More than 60 Tory MPs have now announced they're leaving the Commons as speculation mounts over when the general election will be held. The Prime Minister has ruled out the 2nd of May. Lib Dems leader Sir Ed Davey has accused him of running scared.
I think people are really fed up with this Conservative government and want to see the back of it. And the elections can't come quick enough for the Liberal Democrats and I think the people of our country. When those elections come, whenever Rishi Sunak decides to go to the palace, Liberal Democrats are ready. We've got fantastic candidates who are local champions in their areas. We're campaigning on things like the NHS and the need to tackle the crisis there, the cost of living and things like sewage.
Labour has accused the Prime Minister of being too chicken to call an election. As a result, a group of activists dressed as chickens clucked outside Downing Street, demanding the Prime Minister name the date now. Labour added Rishi Sunak needs to stop squatting in number 10. The Prime Minister's also under fresh pressure following reports his party has received a further £5 million from Frank Hester. The businessman has been accused of being racist after he allegedly said MP Diane Abbott made him want to hate all black women. Rishi Sunak's already facing calls to return a £10 million donation from Mr Hester. On reports of a second sum of money, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, says the Conservative Party follows due process when it comes to declaring funds.
We absolutely are transparent. We follow all the rules, the regulations. We believe in that transparency. Many of the laws about it we actually passed ourselves, and the Conservative Party fully complies with all the requirements to be transparent about our donations.
The Defence Secretary has warned Russia's president not to try it on while he was on a NATO visit in Eastern Europe. GB News has been given exclusive access to a training exercise in Poland where British forces are working with their allies, preparing for any possible attack by Russia. It's part of Steadfast Defender, the largest military exercise since the Cold War. Grant Shapps says NATO allies are ready and willing to protect themselves from any threat.
This exercise is designed to make sure that we can operate with other countries like Poland and be interoperable. Most importantly of all, sending a very clear signal to Putin or any other despotic leader that we will stand up for ourselves and don't try it on.
Meanwhile, voting's underway in Russia to elect the country's next president. Ballots are being cast over 3 days, even though Vladimir Putin is all but certain to win. He appealed to voters yesterday, including in annexed parts of Ukraine, to be united in determining his country's future. Ukraine says any Russian vote in the Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson regions will be void. Now, millions of pounds worth of drugs and 8 XL bullies have been seized during county line raids. Well, hundreds of weapons were also found, including Rambo knives and machetes. Every police force across the country took part in the raids last week, resulting in more than 1,800 arrests. Phone lines used to distribute drugs from cities to towns and villages were also shut down. Former Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville told GB News the crackdown still doesn't solve the wider problem.
Drugs trade is like the Greek story of the Hydra. You cut one head off and two more grow in its place. And what's really frightening with county lines is how they use children. And the reason they use children is because the police were very successful with undercover officers who are obviously adults. And so the drug dealers don't trust anybody they don't know is an adult, but they well know that the police are not allowed to use children as some kind of undercover agent.
McDonald's has been forced to apologise to customers after it was hit by an IT fault. Restaurants were affected globally, but the issue has now been resolved in the UK and Ireland. The company blamed a technology outage, saying there are no cybersecurity issues. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now back to Tom and Emily.
Right, it's 1:08 and MPs' pay will rise to more than £90,000 after the Parliamentary watchdog raised their salaries by an inflation-busting 5.5%, meaning their pay will increase by £4,762 next year.
Those final £2 are obviously very important.
Quite a nice bump, isn't it?
Yeah, well, this comes as it's been reported that the working day for an MP in the House of Commons has averaged just 7 hours and 9 minutes in the last 3 months. That's the lowest since 1997.
Well, our political editor, Christopher Hope, joins us. Now, Christopher, I understand you actually have some news for us on the Tory donor, Frank Hester, and the race row there. What's going on?
That's right. Frank Hester is this millionaire businessman who has given £10 million to the Tory party. He made some comments, reported comments in 2019 about Diane Abbott, saying that he makes him hate black people and wants to shoot her. Earlier this week, we heard how Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, thinks the remarks were racist after a period while we wait to see what Number 10 thought. There's reports today that Frank Hester has given a further £5 million to the Tory party, but we can disclose on GB News that hasn't happened yet. What's happened is the Tories are in talks right now about the additional £5 million donation from Frank Hester, but the money hasn't yet been handed over yet. So essentially the PM, Rishi Sunak, his team in Central Office, have got a choice to make at some point. Will they accept the offer of this extra money?
That makes it such a more exciting story. Christopher, I hope your sleuthing has sent shockwaves and shivers up my spine, because what actually is going on here now is a much more difficult moral question for the Conservative Party. Up until today, they've been able to say, why would you think this guy's a racist? We're not going to give money to a racist, or that it's all done, it's all happened, it's all in the past. Whereas now, this is a live question.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's right, Tom. Senior Tories tell me this lunchtime, in their view, he's not a racist. They point out his wife is from Malaysia, for example, and they say that they hope he'll give the money.
That sounds like some of my friends are black. That's the typical line.
Well,
oh no, his wife's from Malaysia, so it's all okay.
This is what they're saying, and they think that they can still take the money. And they want to, and they think that what's happened here is reports have gone back over what he said 5 years ago. He regrets saying it, but it shouldn't mean he can't give money now to the party. That's what's happening. And I wonder whether this view of senior Tories might explain why the centre was so reluctant to say the remarks were racist when they first emerged a few days ago. We haven't yet seen the actual tape and an audio of what was said, reportedly said, by Mr Hester, but he has apologised for any offence caused.
And I imagine this is quite difficult for the Conservative Party. They've lost quite a few donors, haven't they, over recent months and years. They may well need the money, or they may well think they need the money at least.
Well, Emily,
go on, Chris.
Well, forgive me. I mean, this isn't any old donor. This is 10 million quid, which is a quarter of the party's annual income. I mean, rising to 5 million more, that is a significant hole in their pocket. So the point now is they want to land the extra 5 million. they think he's apologised. The Guardian say he said things. He's apologised for being rude about Diane Abbott. We know that. But will the party, or can the party, accept a further $5 million, given what Mr Sunak has said about the individual?
Oof.
The thing that I think about this is that Rishi Sunak is worth a lot of money. Is his job worth to him that money that he has? Because he and his wife together are sitting on a huge, huge pile of cash. Why doesn't Rishi Sunak just self-fund the campaign? He could give $100 million to the
Yes,
campaign.
could he do that? Could he self-fund it, put his hand in his own pocket and...
Yes, on that very issue, we've heard from Downing Street today that he will accept the 5.5% pay rise, Tom and Emily, seeing what you're worried about, what the millionaire Prime Minister is paid as an MP. His pay will go up now to £166,000. In fact, Number 10 said very clearly that all MPs can accept this. The money is recommended, the 5.5% increase for MPs is recommended by IPSA, this independent body. And of course, other MPs get other money too. 17,000 for a select committee chairman, 50,000 quid for the leader of the opposition, Sir Keir Starmer. It also means that the severance pay for MPs leaving Parliament at the election, like James Heapy announced today, the Armed Forces Minister, will now rise to £20,000 because they get 4 months' pay, not just 2 months' pay, as had been previously. So all the boats are rising in Parliament with the announcement today by IPSA to increase their salaries as MPs by 5.5%.
And there's also been a bit of a stunt outside Downing Street. Let's have a look.
Some poultry spotted. Oh, that is glorious. Of course, what we believe to be Labour Party staffers here making chicken noises. And, I mean, thank goodness they're wearing Rishi Sunak masks over their faces, because it must be a very embarrassing thing to have to do. These people really must be in for perhaps some safe seats in the future.
Well, let's say...
embarrassing themselves like this.
For those listening on the radio, there are maybe about 15... people wearing yellow chicken costumes with the phrase, name the date now. They're calling for an election, calling for Rishi Sunak to name a date.
And the talk had been in Parliament, as we discussed yesterday in your programme, of fever speculation amongst senior Tory MPs that there might be an election now announced next week, maybe Wednesday or Thursday for May the 2nd. That was ruled out last night by the PM on a visit to the West Country. It will not happen on May the 2nd, but only not on May the 2nd. It may happen on a different date in May, June or July. But they are briefing us now that it's probably going to be in the back end of the year. What everyone says to me is the first 2 or 3 weeks of November is the landing zone. But I think I should say to viewers and listeners that the idea of a chicken has a long history in our politics. Famously, Lee Kane, a former spokesman or key advisor to Boris Johnson, was once the mirror chicken. And his job was to follow around David Cameron when Cameron wouldn't agree to doing TV debates towards the end of the 2014-15 period. So often the idea of a chicken following politicians around is part of our culture in the UK. It means that the person being targeted is refusing to take part in something. In this case, there's Labour chickens saying the government is refusing to, the PM is refusing to go to the country and face the electorate.
Well, Christopher Hope, thank you very much for all of those stories, and really, really interesting there on Frank Hester, the Tory. Have you ever worn a chicken suit, Emily?
No. Tom, have you?
Yes. It's really hot. Under the rubber chicken hat, you get incredibly sweaty. It's a very
bit sweaty
experience.
under there. I hope you've cleaned it. If you wear it a lot, anyway.
Well, if I wear it a lot,
I don't know what you do at the weekend, Tom. I don't know what you do at the weekend.
This is my previous job.
Right. Anyway, former Labour Defence Minister, in very serious matters, we're about to speak to the former Defence Minister, Labour Party, Bill Rammell, who joins us now. Bill, let's start you.
Who's never worn a chicken mask?
Thank you for taking it off. I know that in your spare time you're often dressed up as chicken, as all serious people are.
To hound Rishi Sunak out of Number 10. But Bill, MP's pay rise 5.5%, up to £90,000 or so a year. It's also been reported in the FT that MPs are clocking off early in Parliament. What's your take on this all? Do they deserve this pay rise? Are they a bit work shy?
Do you know, there are many criticisms you can make of MPs, but being in it for the money is really not one of them. And I say that of MPs of all parties. You know, this is an independent process through IPSA. It's actually less as a percentage increase than they normally would have got, because they normally link it to the average public sector pay rise. Because there's been a lot of those pay deals with one-off catch-up payments, they didn't do that. They linked it this year to the percentage increase of senior civil servants. And if you look at public sector pay rises in the last year, they've been above this level. So, you know, in decades gone by, when MPs used to set their own pay, I think that was wrong. There's an independent process and it should be abided by. Also, the point about MPs clocking off early, I mean, look, when I was an MP and a minister, I used to work 70+ hours per week. I think that's the norm for the vast majority of MPs. The reason Parliament is sitting less frequently at the moment is because we've got a government that is extraordinarily weak and frankly can't table enough legislation because it risks splits and votes against it from its own party supporters. And that's why Parliament is, you know, you look at it every week, there's, you know, 1 or 2 days of one-line whips where MPs don't have to be in the House. And it's because of the government's lack of authority. But that doesn't mean that MPs are just going home early. They're working in their constituency.
Yeah, no, I think that is an important point to make, but it is remarkable how a government elected with a majority of 80, that majority is now just 46 in the House of Commons, which is not a big one.
And they're not bothering. They're not bothering with as much legislation. No. Have they run out of steam? That's what the Labour Party would say, of course.
But Bill, there's another big question we want to get to, and that is what's going on in Tower Hamlets. The mayor Lutfur Rahman, who's an independent, represents a lot of the Bangladeshi community there, has seemingly been forced to take down Palestinian flags that have been all over council property for months.
Well, I'm always suspicious of something Lutfur Rahman does, because frankly the guy's an extremist. However, I actually welcome this decision. People should be able to protest peacefully. They should be able to put whatever flag they want as long as it's not inciting violence within their own home. But you shouldn't have flags, political symbols on public buildings, whether it's lampposts, whether it's council offices. You know, we're shortly going to be going into a general election campaign. We wouldn't expect party banners to be on council public buildings. And so actually on this occasion, I welcome the decision that's been taken.
Bill, what evidence do you have to suggest this mayor is an extremist?
You look at his track record of the statements he's made, the way that he has sought to, a bit like George Galloway, the way that he has sought to provoke division within predominantly Muslim communities, you know, a very strong track record of extremism. He's certainly not somebody that I would want representing me.
And it's clear he wasn't too pleased about having to take down these flags.
No. I think he was dragged kicking and screaming to do it. And he's now trying to ask for understanding for having taken the decision. But, you know, I think most reasonable people would say that whatever the cause, you know, in council offices, in a public building, that there should be independence and you shouldn't be able to put up posters or flags.
Union flag or nothing, I say. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah. Bill Rammell, former Labour Defence Minister. Run out of time there.
No, but it is fair to say that Bill is absolutely right. I mean, Lutfur Rahman is a guy who was actually forced out of office after the election court officially reported him to be personally guilty of corrupt or illegal practices, electoral fraud. He was barred for office for 6 years, but of course, as soon as that bar from office expired, he got elected again.
Yes, I think there are lots of stories like this from across the country. Anyway, Lutfur Rahman, who is the mayor of Tower Hamlets, has said in response, the flags are symbols of solidarity and sympathy for those enduring extreme suffering in Gaza. We must not forget that over 30,000 people have now been killed, 70% of whom are women and children. The flag certainly had an impact and made residents' views clear.
Well, there we go. Nice to have his words. But the NHS is set to introduce new electric ambulances. But what will this mean for plans, and could it mean slower response times? Well, the NHS stands accused of putting green credentials above medical priorities. We'll get into the details after this.
Mark
Mark Dolan Tonight. Weekends from 9 p.m.
I've personally been very torn on whether Prince Harry should have full police protection when he's in the United Kingdom. On the one hand, why should taxpayers fork out for somebody that's left the country and the institution? He is no longer a working, serving royal. But I don't think it matters. He is one of the most famous men in the world, and whether he's a royal or not, he is an ambassador for this country. And he still does good. Charitable causes, the Invictus Games, and he is still a nice and charming guy with a heart. And whilst he has left the royal family and departed these shores, he was and remains the son of King Charles. That is a biological fact. Well, let's hope so. And it wasn't his choice to be born into royalty. It wasn't his choice to be the son of the king. And for that reason, I think he should have equal police protection to his brother William when he is in this country. He couldn't be a more high-profile figure, and unfortunately, like all the royals, Harry will be a target for some very bad people. I fear that if, God forbid, anything happened to him or his family, the authorities would have blood on their hands. So, it's not often that I back Prince Harry, but on this one, he has my support. Look what happened to his poor mum, killed in a Paris tunnel in the 1990s with an allegedly drunk chauffeur. A top royal security insider recently told me that Diana would still be with us today if she had had top royal protection at that time. So let's not make the same mistake twice. Prince Harry needs full protection and the best we've got. Yes, he might be a numpty, but he's our numpty.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. 24 minutes past 1, and paramedics fear patients will be forced to wait for longer for ambulances to arrive.
Yes, because the NHS is set to introduce electric ambulances, raising concerns that the drive for net zero is being put above patient safety. Reports say electric ambulances will take up to 4 hours to charge and travel an average of only 70 miles. Surely this is impractical.
Well, is the NHS prioritising net zero over patients? Let's debate it. Joining us is senior meteorologist at the British Weather Service's Jim Dale, who thinks the NHS is not prioritising patients over net zero, and Deputy Director of Net Zero Watch, Andrew Montford, who thinks that the NHS are. Well, Andrew, I suppose you've got the case to make here. Are the NHS putting net zero above patients?
Well, clearly, if an electric ambulance can only do 70 miles at a time, then it is a real problem. The NHS doesn't have loads of money, so if you're going to have battery-powered ambulances that can only do that sort of distance, you're going to need a lot more of them, and it's going to cost a whole lot more money, which means you'll have less money to spend on other things, like actually delivering medical services. You can say it's rational to have a climate policy, but it needs to be a rational climate policy, and this clearly isn't rational. You actually look at the NHS's decarbonisation plan, and it's bonkers.
OK, Jim, let's pause. Sorry, Andrew, let's pause there and throw this over to Jim. This is irrational.
Not at all. It's why should the NHS be lagging behind the rest of industry? Even those that are mostly against or are totally against net zero, people like Richard Tice, Benabik, they drive electric cars. Now, they're not in the public sector. That's their own private car, granted. But this is the direction of travel. And I think the NHS is moving in the right direction, albeit, and it will be.
But Jim, according to reports, paramedics are raising concerns that electric ambulances just aren't quite fit enough for purpose, i.e. they could potentially fail to reach people in time, the amount of electricity that needs to be used will drain the battery very quickly, and they may not be able to save lives at the same rate. Surely that's not worth it.
I hear what you're saying, Emily, but you've got to be very careful in terms of where these reports come from. They emanate from the Daily Telegraph, who do a lot of behind-the-scenes work and then put it on their inside pages in terms of the fear factor, in terms of these kind of evolutionary moves, in terms of the green industry. And as I said to you, this is an evolution, not a revolution. It used to be back in the 1980s, we used to have those big phones. You remember those? And everybody used to say, oh, the brick phones, if you like. And no, that would never catch on. You know, you don't want one of them. They're too expensive, etc., etc. And then the scare about cancer. And now, look, everybody's got one and everybody works with it. It will be exactly the same with the electrification of vehicles, whether in the NHS or elsewhere.
Well, let's throw that back to Andrew now. Andrew, these things are becoming more and more common. Not every ambulance in the NHS is going to immediately be electric, but looking at some of these fancy electric cars now on the roads, these things go like the clappers. They're fast and accelerating, they're cool and futuristic. What's not to love?
Well, I'm sure this is why people like Richard Tice have one, because I'm told, I mean, I don't have one, but I'm told they're a lot of fun to drive and they accelerate really quickly. That's not really relevant for an ambulance. But what you want for an ambulance is reasonable speed for long distances, so that you can do lots of work and get lots of sick people to hospital. If you can only do 70 miles, well, I mean, from where I live, it's something like 40 miles to the nearest hospital. So you're going to be able to get from the ambulance to here. You might get back again, but maybe not. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous at the moment. So maybe in 50 years' time, when battery technology has improved, if battery technology improves, then maybe it will be possible. But to say we're just going to do it, this is very, very foolish.
Well, Jim, this is about so much more than electric ambulances. Next month, according to reports, the NHS will essentially be demanding a carbon reduction plan from its suppliers. So I come to the NHS saying I want to sell you 10,000 pens, and they say, oh wait, you have to fill in all these sheets of paper about what your carbon reduction plans are and what your carbon footprint are. This is going to raise costs. Is it not?
Well, I'll tell you what, Emily, if we don't do these little steps, and these are little steps that you're talking about, if everybody contributes, it's actually a big step, because behind all of this and what we're actually talking about, the elephant in the room is climate change and the impacts of that. And I need to mention that as the world continues to warm up as we speak in various countries around the world, as we go through one of the wettest winters, if not the wettest winter for some people on record in the UK. All of this comes back to that. Those are the underlying reasons for this. And it isn't just a wish thing to say, oh, yeah, we want faster cars, slower cars. But there's one other element, and that is the NHS are struggling as it is, okay? And the biggest problem is not going to be electric cars, it's electric vehicles. It's going to be what we have at this moment in time in terms of ambulances queuing up because there isn't enough money going into the NHS and there isn't enough staff. And that's where we get the problem.
But Jim, isn't the point that there's been a third extra funding, real terms, 1/3 extra budget for the NHS, and it doesn't feel like it? Why? Things are getting more expensive. Yeah. Why? Things like these green policies.
It's not things like these green policies, because these green policies in the NHS have hardly started. It's not that. Look at the history, the recent history, Tom, and everybody will realise that the NHS is on its knees because of the lousy handling by this of the UK government. It's as simple as that. It's not rocket science, this one.
Andrew, just lastly, an NHS green team. Surely this is the way forward. £3 million on salaries for making the NHS green and beautiful.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is the way the state runs things, isn't it? You know, they appoint some more bureaucrats, and the bureaucrats are well paid, and they probably have electric cars and all this sort of thing. And the money just disappears away from where it's meant to be spent onto pen pushers.
Well, thank you very much. A great head-to-head there, Andrew Mumford and Jim Dale. Great to speak to you both. Good stuff.
Well, up next, we'll be discussing the Palestine flag row as Tower Hamlets Council have been pressured to remove flags from their infrastructure, lampposts and their buildings. Hundreds of complaints were sent in from residents. Well, we'll speak to a local councillor who's been active in this area for his thoughts just after your news headlines with Tatiana.
Tom, thank you. The top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has suffered a blow with another Tory MP announcing he won't run at the next general election. James Heappey is also expected to resign as Armed Forces Minister by the end of this month. GB News understands the decision is not over defence spending. Citing personal reasons, Mr Heappey says he's standing down to prioritise his family and to pursue a different career. More than 60 Tory MPs have now announced they're leaving the Commons at the next election. A £5 million donation from Frank Hester has not yet been given to the Conservatives, with senior party sources telling GB News talks about the funds are still being held. The businessman, who's already given the party £10 million, is accused of being racist after he allegedly said MP Diane Abbott made him want to hate all black women. The Prime Minister is under pressure to return the donation. Millions of pounds worth of drugs and 8 XL bullies have been seized during county lines raids. Hundreds of weapons were also found, including Rambo knives and machetes. Every police force across the country took part in the raids last week, resulting in more than 1,800 arrests. The Defence Secretary is warning Russia's president not to try it on while he was on a NATO visit in Eastern Europe. GB News was given exclusive access to a training exercise in Poland where British forces are working with their allies, preparing for any possible attack by Russia. It's part of Steadfast Defender, the largest military exercise since the Cold War. Grant Shapps says NATO members are ready and willing to protect themselves from any threat. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2753 and €1.1709. The price of gold is £1,694.70 per ounce, and the FTSE 100 is at 7,750 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Hello again, I'm here with your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Today's showers are largely going to ease as we go through later today, taking us into a bit of a chilly night because the low pressure centre that has brought some blustery and showery weather today is clearing away towards the northeast with a bit of a ridge of high pressure building from the west. Yes, there will still be some showers as we go through the end of the afternoon, particularly across eastern parts, but turning drier and clearer from the west, and with clear skies and a bit of a northerly wind, we're likely to see our temperatures dropping tonight. It will be chillier than it has been through some recent nights. Could dip just a bit below freezing across northern parts, a touch of frost possible. Elsewhere, there may be a few pockets of mist and fog. Otherwise, though, Saturday gets off to a fine start for many areas, and across the north and east, we're going to hold on to the blue, sunny skies through much of the day. But in the south and west here, it will turn increasingly cloudy, and there'll be some wet weather at times too, with something a bit more persistent and heavy rain-wise pushing into Northern Ireland later. Temperatures will be lifting as we go through the day, so after a chilly start, we should see highs quite widely in the low to mid-teens Celsius. Wet weather then pushes its way through as we go through Saturday night into Sunday, clearing away towards the east, and so Sunday itself actually looks largely dry for many places, albeit with a scattering of showers, and there'll be some strong winds too. Monday should be mostly dry, just a few showers to watch out for before some more rain arrives on Tuesday. That's it for me. I'll see you later.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Earlier on breakfast.
You might have thought this is the time to sort of get ready for a spring election, but it is not going to happen, is it?
Well, I think Rishi Sunak is running scared, isn't he? And I think it's a real shame because people around the country are sick and tired of this Conservative government.
People deserve to have that choice. They have the, they deserve to be able to vote for the change that they want.
Just do not see in the Sussex world how that wouldn't have come up with a bit of an amber flag.
Alex, are you, as Anne says, a lazy snowflake? From 6, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is 38 minutes past 1, and our inbox is chock-a-block with all of your messages about one of the lead stories today, our MPs getting paid more to do less work.
Chock-a-block like the roads will be later on because of that M25 closure in the southeast.
Don't get me started.
The amount of chock-a-block there is going to be on the roads in the southeast anyway, if that's where you are at home, it's going to be a bit of a nightmare.
If you're in southeast England, don't travel this weekend. Don't travel. But
anyway, views.
Yes, Stephen has written in to say all MPs should not get paid. They should be an MP because they want to help their area, not their bank balance.
And Sean says, I listened to the above. Our MP Wendy Morton deserves every penny. She works tirelessly on behalf of her constituents here in Aldridge and Brown Hills, West Midlands. She's doing such a great job and earns every penny. So there you go. Congratulations to Wendy Morton. You pleased Sean?
Didn't Wendy Morton resign and then unresign when she was briefly Chief Whip?
Well, that doesn't matter to Sean. Okay. Sean is very happy with her performance. Andy says some MPs deserve a pay rise. My MP, Mr Tomlinson's office, really helped me with an antisocial behaviour problem. So without their help, I would still be fighting the Housing Association for a resolution. Yes, MPs do really sometimes help a lot, and their offices do really help with these sort of getting in touch with the Housing Association on your behalf.
This never used to be the role of an MP. This always used to be a role of a local council, rather than MPs were sort of meant to do the big national stuff.
So they pass it on to the council, but it just carries weight.
The job of an MP is sort of merging into being lots of things that it never used to be.
Social
because they're
worker.
trying to find time to fill up their time.
Yes. Well, I should say I did work for an MP at one point, quite a few years ago now, and I did help quite a lot of constituents finally get an answer from their local council, so there you go, tap on the back.
Speaking of councils, Emily, and what a lovely segue, an inner London council is to start removing Palestinian flags from its infrastructure after receiving hundreds of complaints from residents, including Jewish people distressed by their presence.
Now, Tower Hamlets in East London originally decided against removing the flags, which have been hung up up on lampposts and in high streets because they didn't want to destabilise community cohesion. But residents protested and the group UK Lawyers for Israel threatened legal action unless the council removed them.
Well, the Member of Parliament Paul Scully last month was accused of Islamophobia for claiming there were no-go areas in the borough of Tower Hamlets. We spoke to him a little bit earlier, but now we're going to speak to someone local to the area, the Conservative councillor for Tower Hamlets, Peter Golds. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. I suppose there's been a difference here with Tower Hamlets compared to lots of other councils. When flags have been put up on public property, they've been taken down in other areas, but for months in Tower Hamlets, they stayed up.
Absolutely. There are two issues here. Firstly, when the flags were put up on the main roads, which are the TfL roads or the big highways, they were taken down instantly with no kickback from any members of the public. But when they were put on the streets that Tower Hamlets are responsible for, they stayed. Now, we're not talking about flags in people's homes. If somebody wishes to put a flag in their home or their window, that's up to them. We believe in free speech and we cannot intervene on that. But flags on lampposts, particularly when it's on every lamppost in a street, is a completely different matter.
And the mayor essentially had to be forced, didn't he, to take down these flags. He didn't really want to. He said they were a sign of solidarity with the residents of Gaza. He spoke of the tens of thousands of people, he said, who have died in the conflict in Gaza. And so he really did not want to do this, did he?
No, I think he was very, very slow on the uptake. But let's be absolutely fair. We have an executive mayor and he has absolute overall control of all decision making, and the chief executive commissioned a report from a lawyer, and the lawyer said legally that the flags were not lawful, and they've been sitting on that report for weeks. So it took action from other groups of people to say, you know, the flags aren't lawful, and if you're not careful, we will take action.
That's an extraordinary thing to learn here, that they were told they were not lawful, but they didn't act, and it had to be external lawyers getting in touch to make sure this happens. Can you just let us know if there have been people getting into contact with you as a local councillor about how they feel about every lamppost, which is supposed to be public, neutral territory, being covered in these flags? Has it made some of your constituents nervous to walk the streets?
It's made not just my constituents, not the people I represent on the Isle of Dogs, but people have been getting in touch with me from across the whole borough. And it's a complete range of people, including people who are from the Bangladeshi Muslim community who support the endeavours of Gaza, of what is going on, and are hostile to the actions of the Israeli government, but feel that they shouldn't have these flags on streets. I thought if you walk down some of the streets, it doesn't look like a London borough. It looks almost like what you would imagine in Ceausescu's Romania, with flags on every street lamp.
Well, Peter, can you let us know what it's like in the council and their activities in Tower Hamlets? How much time, for example, has been spent discussing issues relating to what's happening in the Middle East? Has it dominated quite a lot of time?
No. Let's be absolutely fair to the mayor and the administration. There's a heck of a lot to do in this council. We have extremes of deprivation and, of course, wealth because of the Canary Wharf and City Fringe. We have huge problems on the council, and to be fair, the council spends its time doing council matters. And they said initially, in fact, absolutely carefully at council meetings, we can't interfere with foreign policy, but we got a lot to do on national policy and local policy. Let's concentrate on that. And that is what the council itself has tried to do. But of course, what took place in the streets is a completely different matter. It's not what takes place in the town hall and at council meetings.
So there hasn't been too much pressure that you can see from people living in the borough for the council to take a stance on what's happening in the Middle East, to take a public stance? I mean, besides allowing these flags everywhere, I suppose.
Oh, there most certainly has been, and members of the council and the administration have put their support. But if they go out in the street and go on a march, it's, as I've said, we're talking of free speech. They're entitled to do that, but it's what happens where the council is responding to absolutely everybody, all 320,000 people who live in our borough.
Well, Peter Goulds, you raise a really, really important issue here, and thank you for joining us and telling us a bit what it's like in the borough of Tower Hamlets. Some people might call it the People's Republic of Tower Hamlets.
Thank you very much indeed, Peter Goulds, there, Conservative councillor for Tower Hamlets. Now, the AI image generator, Adobe Firefly, has faced a backlash for rewriting history with its version of the founding fathers of the USA. This is quite extraordinary.
Yes, we'll be discussing that after this.
Dubes & Co. Weekdays from 6 p.m.
Get this right, we all know by now, don't we, that so many NHS workers are abused by people that they're trying to help. We'll all agree that that is pretty damn disgraceful, but what do we do about it? Because now some London hospitals are looking at whether or not they should be able to ban people that do this for a year from those hospital facilities. Is that the way forward? Daniel, do you like this? No abuse, no excuse, that is the campaign?
There's no other choice for most people. It's either the NHS or nothing. And if you're going to take that monopolistic power, then you need, I think, you have responsibilities towards people. You can't cut them off. So there are ways in which, of course, you can bring criminal charges against them. If they've committed a criminal offence, that's fine. They might even be locked up in jail. But what you can't do is cut off health services because you're the only supplier.
Well, yes, I think you can cut it off, and you should cut it off. London is very different from everywhere else, and it goes back to a conversation about immigration. The majority of nurses in London are either African or Filipino, and it harks back to their nature and their culture. When you're younger, your parents look after you. When you're older, you look after them. They don't go into homes. So there's a way that a threshold of tolerance they have that is above and beyond most people. So, because I found like when I was younger, most of the nurses were white. Now they work in hospitals in Ascot and Somerset. London is the war zone. I have seen horrific things happen to nurses, and they stay, they show up for work. There's a protection they are owed, beyond owed. And if you abuse something that's offered to you as a part of your citizenship, there should be a penalty for that. For the same reason,
you're obliged to use it. There's no offer involved in the NHS.
But there is an offer, because at the end of the day, like you figure out how to get money and go private. So just because you've created something that gives you no, it's easy. If it's
that's
easy,
an impossible solution.
They've created something that's kind and easy and beneficial to all, indeed. But it's a good thing for all. Do not abuse it. That simply.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's coming up to 10 minutes to 2. And here's an interesting one for you. The AI image generator Adobe Firefly. Now, Adobe are the same company that make Photoshop, so this is a big deal.
That's our royal family enjoy.
They certainly do. Their new product, Firefly, is the latest tool to face a public backlash. Now, if you don't know how these image generators work, you give the tool a prompt, a little sentence, and it will generate an image. But in this case, the New York Post asked to create a photo of, for example, the founding fathers of the United States of America. These are just some of the images that were created. These are the founding fathers of the United States of America. These were German soldiers, a request, and this was a request for some of those founding fathers too. I mean, it's an interesting roster of images that seems to be promoting, well, people that might not look like the
hang on.
1930s, 1940s German soldiers that we're asking to depict here, or the founding fathers that we're being asked to depict here.
Are you telling me that this is historically inaccurate, Tom?
I think it might be
Surely
a smidge.
not.
It might be a smidge historically inaccurate. And here's the really important thing. This is exactly the same blunder that Google ran into with their Gemini product, which was about generating images, but it couldn't generate images of white people. It would only create diverse images. So when reporters asked it to generate an image of the Pope, they got a picture of a black woman. Well, this by Adobe is doing exactly the same thing. This is a big problem in artificial intelligence.
Yes, because it's simply not accurate. For those listening on the radio, essentially what you've got is you've got an image of the founding fathers of the United States, and it is two black men. You've then got a picture
of women, and
I don't know who this is supposed to be.
I think this is supposed to be a German soldier. There were some asked to create images of German soldiers from the 1930s and 1940s, basically Nazis. And what we can see in the next picture, here it is, the Nazis are, according to Adobe Firefly, very racially diverse.
Very racially diverse.
And clearly what's happened here is that the people who have created this tool have said, whatever you do, whatever anyone asks of you, make sure it's diverse and inclusive. But the problem with a command that all AI must always produce something diverse and inclusive is that very often that means they'll produce something that's wrong.
I love how much this winds you up. But it is ridiculous.
It's so important.
It is ridiculous.
Because this is stuff that's going to... At the moment, these are just little tools that are everywhere. But this technology is going to be put in Photoshop.
And in schools.
Google's technology is going to be put in search. I mean, all of this stuff is going to be in every piece of technology that we use. This is the early stuff, and we're finding all of these problems.
Also,
how
children...
How much further is it going to go?
School children, for example, will look something up and they'll get a completely warped perspective on history. But let's get some of your views on other matters we've been talking about. We've been talking about electric ambulances and the drive for net zero in the NHS. Patricia says, imagine the epitaph. He didn't die of climate change. He died waiting for the ambulance designed to save him from climate change. Crazy.
Well, Robert has got in touch to say, with the power all ready to go in a battery, an electric car can accelerate as fast as the motors are designed to allow. That means that several offer astonishing 0 to 60 mile per hour times that trounce even the most potent internal combustion cars. So Robert here is saying that these electric cars can be so much faster.
Yes, well, it's pretty useless if you're in traffic. Kathleen says, while I fully support any effort to reduce our carbon footprint, it shouldn't be at the patient's expense. Following surgery in 2022 for cancer 5 months ago, I had further biopsies and CT scans. I wasn't given the results until yesterday evening. You waited 5 months for results. That is not good enough, is it?
Really, really bad. And Surinder has got in touch to say the NHS has been captured by the woke lobby. I spent 40 hours in an ambulance and then in an A&E chair waiting for a bed. I'm 87. No other European country has these issues. And Surinder, I think you're absolutely right here. The way that some European countries run their healthcare system with a lot less top-down, a lot less sort of state bureaucracy, seems to be a lot more efficient.
I just think it's crazy that if you want to sell something to the NHS, you have to fill in a carbon reduction plan or present one, or you will do from next month.
If you want to sell a biro to the NHS, you have to give reams of forms. They're not allowed to buy it from you until they've checked all of your supply, until you've ticked every box and complied with every climate diktat.
Oh, it shouldn't be funny, but I guess you've got to laugh. Well. Anyway, up next, we're going to be debating whether MPs are overpaid and work shy. We've got both sides of this debate. One person thinks no, they should be paid more. The other thinks absolutely not. You won't want to miss it. Stay with us. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. Overpaid and work shy.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, I'm here with your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Today's showers are largely going to ease as we go through later today, taking us into a bit of a chilly night because the low pressure centre that has brought some blustery and showery weather today is clearing away towards the northeast with a bit of a ridge of high pressure building from the west. Yes, there will still be some showers as we go through the end of the afternoon, particularly across eastern parts, but turning drier and clearer from the west, and with clear skies and a bit of a northerly wind, we're likely to see our temperatures dropping tonight. It will be chillier than it has been through some recent nights, could dip just a bit below freezing across northern parts, a touch of frost possible. Elsewhere there may be a few pockets of mist and fog. Otherwise though, Saturday gets off to a fine start for many areas, and across the north and east we're going to hold on to the blue sunny skies through much of the day, but in the south and west here it will turn increasingly cloudy and there'll be some wet weather at times too, with something a bit more persistent and heavy rain-wise pushing into Northern Ireland later. Temperatures will be lifting as we go through the day, so after a chilly start we should see highs quite widely in the low to mid-teens Celsius. Wet weather then pushes its way through as we go through Saturday night into Sunday, clearing away towards the east, and so Sunday itself actually looks largely dry for many places, albeit with a scattering of showers, and there'll be some strong winds too. Monday should be mostly dry, just a few showers to watch out for before some more rain arrives on Tuesday. That's it for me, I'll see you later.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be a winner?
You've won £18,000.
Oh, flipping heck. I don't know what to say.
Enter our massive spring giveaway with 3 big seasonal prizes to be won. There's £12,345 in tax-free cash to give your finances a spring boost. We'll also send you on a shopping spree with £500 worth of vouchers to spend in the store of your choice. You'll also get a garden gadget package. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Friday, the 15th of March.
Work shy and overpaid. It's a bumper pay rise for MPs, but it's revealed they're clocking off earlier than ever.
Meghan Markle business backlash. Meghan Markle faces claims and criticism once again after she's slammed for launching her new lifestyle brand at the same time that Prince William attended the Diana Legacy Award.
And Liz Truss and her gender bill. Ministers could back a law banning biological men from women-only spaces as former Prime Minister Liz Truss pushes her gender bill through the Commons. Lots of you are still getting in touch about MPs' wages. We're going to be debating this, whether they are. We'll find out once and for all whether they are overpaid and whether they are work shy. I think that's a bit harsh. I think it depends who your representative is.
But here's the thing, this always gets people going because there are such good arguments on either side. On the one hand, £91,500, it's a huge amount of money. It's so much more than the average wage in this country. And people feel that in a time of economic instability, that's just not justifiable. But on the other hand, very rightly, people say that actually these are supposed to be the 650 people who are our legislators, who are making the laws, very important people. They should be the most talented people in the country. And if they were at the top of their game as a lawyer or as a financial trader or as a businessman, they would be making much more than that.
Yeah, you say that, and I take that point, and there will be a lot of MPs who could be commanding much higher salaries elsewhere in industry, in the city, in legal work and whatever else. But there are also probably some MPs for which this will be their highest salary ever,
That's
and
very
that they
true.
certainly would not be able to command such a high salary
But Emily,
elsewhere.
the argument...
So it's a mixed bag.
The argument, though, is that, yes, we have lots of MPs who really probably couldn't command that wage outside of the Commons, but is the reason why we have low-grade people in our House of Commons because the people who are titans of industry and city lawyers and all the people who are earning squillions, far more than I could ever dream of earning, none of them want to become MPs.
Well, you could earn lots. You have to become an entrepreneur, set up your own business, go global.
What would I
can
sell?
see it. The Tom Harwood...
What would I sell? It's got to be alliterative, quick.
Tom Harwood's toys.
Tupperware.
There you go. Tupperware. Tupperware it is, not toys. Let's go to the news.
Emily, thank you and good afternoon. 2 minutes past 2, your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister has suffered a blow with another Tory MP announcing he won't run at the next general election. Citing personal reasons, James Heapy says he's standing down to prioritise his family and to pursue a different career. Downing Street says he'll be greatly missed in Parliament. He's also expected to resign as Armed Forces Minister by the end of this month. More than 60 Tory MPs have now announced they're leaving the Commons as speculation mounts over when the general election will be held. The Prime Minister has ruled out the 2nd of May. Lib Dems leader Sir Ed Davey has accused him of running scared.
I think people are really fed up at this Conservative government and want to see the back of it. And the elections can't come quick enough for the Liberal Democrats and I think the people of our country. When those elections come, whenever Rishi Sunak decides to go to the palace, Liberal Democrats are ready. We've got fantastic candidates who are local champions in their areas. We're campaigning on things like the NHS and the need to tackle the crisis there, the cost of living and things like sewage.
Labour has accused the Prime Minister of being too chicken to call an election. As a result, a group of activists dressed as chickens clucked outside Downing Street, demanding the Prime Minister name the date now. Labour added Rishi Sunak needs to stop squatting in number 10. A £5 million donation from Frank Hester has not yet been given to the Conservatives, with senior party sources telling GB News talks about the funds are still underway. The businessman, who's already given the party £10 million, is accused of being racist after he allegedly said MP Diane Abbott made him want to hate all black women. The Prime Minister, who's in Sunderland with the Chancellor today, is under pressure to return the donation. Jeremy Hunt says the Conservative Party follows due process when it comes to declaring funds.
We absolutely are transparent. We follow all the rules, the regulations. We believe in that transparency. Many of the laws about it we actually passed ourselves, and the Conservative Party fully complies with all the requirements to be transparent about our donations.
The Defence Secretary has warned Russia's president not to try it on while he was on a NATO visit in Eastern Europe. GB News has been given exclusive access to a training exercise in Poland where British forces are working with their allies, preparing for any possible attack by Russia. It's part of Steadfast Defender, the largest military exercise since the Cold War. Grant Shapp says NATO allies are ready and willing to protect themselves from any threat.
This exercise is designed to make sure that we can operate with other countries like Poland and be interoperable. Most importantly of all, sending a very clear signal to Putin or any other despotic leader that we will stand up for ourselves and don't try it on.
Meanwhile, voting's underway in Russia to elect the country's next president. Ballots are being cast over 3 days, even though Vladimir Putin is all but certain to win. He appealed to voters yesterday, including in annexed parts of Ukraine, to be united in determining his country's future. Ukraine says any Russian vote in the Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson regions will be void. Millions of pounds worth of drugs and 8 XL bully dogs have been seized during county lines raids. Hundreds of weapons were also found, including Rambo knives and machetes. Every police force across the country took part in the raids last week, resulting in more than 1,800 arrests. Phone lines used to distribute drugs from cities to towns and villages were also shut down. Former Detective Chief Inspector Mike Neville told GB News the crackdown still doesn't solve the wider problem.
Drugs trade is like the Greek story of the Hydra. You cut one head off and 2 more grow in its place. And what's really frightening with county lines is how they use children. And the reason they use children is because the police were very successful with undercover officers who are obviously adults. And so the drug dealers don't trust anybody they don't know is an adult, but they well know that the police are not allowed to use children as some kind of undercover agent.
McDonald's has been forced to apologise to customers after it was hit by an IT fault. Restaurants were affected globally, but the issue has now been resolved in the UK and Ireland. The company blamed a technology outage, saying there are no cybersecurity issues. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
It's 2:07 in the afternoon. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain with Tom Harwood and me, Emily Carver. Now, MPs' pay will rise to more than £90,000. The Parliamentary watchdog has raised their salaries by an inflation-busting 5.5%.
Well, this comes as it's been reported that the working day for an MP in the House of Commons has averaged just 7 hours and 9 minutes over the last 3 months. That's the lowest average since 1997.
Why could that be? All while the Conservatives are still in talks about additional £5 million in donations from the race row donor, Frank Hester.
My goodness, so much to go on here. Who better to go through it with than our political editor, Christopher Hope, who joins us live from Westminster. Christopher, let's firstly start out with this whole idea of the House of Commons sitting for less time in the last quarter compared to what it sat for before. It's sometimes known as a zombie parliament.
That's because, hi Tommy, hi Emily, that's right, because they sometimes knock off what I would say is quite early at 4:30 in the afternoon on some days with all the government business done. They've never really got going because of the COVID pandemic. There's so much they haven't done in their manifesto and some things which won't be touched. And I wonder if this party does enter opposition, as the polls suggest, in November at the likely election, they might regret how they haven't really used their time in Parliament to push through what some would see as actual Tory policies. There's been some research done, published in the FT today. The amount of time they're sitting is down to a 25-day low. They still are doing nearly 8 hours a day, but the point is they're barely there because of the way that MPs are meant to be at home on Fridays. They have one-line whips on Thursdays, not required to be around. They're basically there maybe half the year, and that is frustrating for people who think that the role of MPs should be on the green benches debating, discussing the issues of the day. It comes as, embarrassingly, or perhaps unfortunately, the IPSA group, body, which is the independent body that sets MPs' pay, has given them all a 5.5% pay rise, more than CPI inflation at 4%. That's raised some people have said, why are you doing that? They're all getting it, all the MPs, even the millionaires like Rishi Sunak. What's being held and frozen is the ministerial salary. Other MPs get other bumps on the side, and they're also probably going to go up too. That's Select Committee Chairman gets $17,000 a year, for example. The Leader of the Opposition, Sir Keir Starmer, $50,000. And all this has a bearing on the cost of the taxpayer, because when the 60 or so Tory MPs plus others leave Parliament at the end of this Parliament, they'll get 4 months net pay to help them unwind their offices rather than 2 months. So essentially, the tide is rising or coming in, and all the boats are floating, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. And Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, has a decision on his hands, a very active decision. This £5 million, this extra donation from Frank Hester, who has proven rather controversial, to say the least, they haven't yet decided whether they're going to accept another £5 million.
That's right, Emily. So we're revealing at this lunchtime on your programme at GB News that this individual, Frank Hester, on your screen now, he's a millionaire. He gave £10 million to the Tory party last year. Now, it was reported today he gave a further £5 million, and that hadn't yet been reported by the Electoral Commission. That is not the case. What is the case is the Tories are in talks about the extra £5 million, and that might explain the delay we saw earlier this week when those reported remarks came out from Frank Hester about Diane Abbott and about her race. The remarks were not condemned as racist until after Kevin Badenoch stepped in. And I wonder, and don't know this, but I wonder, but it will fuel speculation, that the delay was caused because the party is in talks about this other sum coming towards them. They didn't want to risk offending a major donor. By that point, of course, Frank Hester had denied his racist but apologised for being rude about Diane Abbott.
No, it's a really, really fascinating story there. And as you say, this being a live decision takes the conversation to a very different place it was yesterday. It's very hard for a party that might have already spent millions of pounds to somehow magic it back and give it back, and whether that's a moral thing to do and all the rest of it. But not having taken an extra £5 million yet suddenly changes the terms of that very question. But Christopher, you've got an announcement yourself rather than just reporting the news from others, a new podcast for GB News.
That's right, Tom and Emily. It's a new political podcast called Chopper's Political Podcast, just so you're quite clear what it's about and who I am. My nickname is Chopper in these parts. And it's just trying to get out there to a new audience for GB News on Spotify, Apple iTunes, YouTube, and of course gbnews.com, the best website in the country, of course. And today we've interviewed Holly Valance, and she's a former pop star, Neighbours star, film star. She's been quite quiet for 10 years, hasn't spoken out at all until she appeared at this PopCon event, a popular Conservative event, and spoke rather amusingly about the journey from left to right that many people do go through in this country in terms of political support. We've got a clip now of what she had to say to us.
Last time I voted Conservatives. Next time I'll be voting Reform.
Really?
Yeah.
You're at heart.
Well, I think the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And I'm sure as hell not going to Labour.
Well, that looks like it's going to be quite interesting indeed. I mean, Conservative pop stars, that is something to come out, isn't it? Takes a lot to come out as a Conservative pop star.
Girls say they liked Margaret Thatcher. Am I making that up? I'm fairly sure that once upon a time, one of the Spice Girls called their hero Margaret Thatcher.
They wouldn't admit that now, would they?
Well, I think they were saying that she exhibited what's known as girl power, which Emily knows all about. I think that was the idea with the Spice Girls. But you are right, there aren't many celebrities to the right of centre. She makes the point in the podcast that many celebrities in Hollywood and elsewhere are too afraid to speak out. It's far easier to genuflect towards woke issues than actually say what you think. And I think her clarity of thought is helped. She's a mother of two, married to a millionaire, Nick Candy, a Tory donor. And by the way, Nick Candy is going to keep voting Tory, not Labour, as reported elsewhere, she tells us. that I think she feels she can talk. And I asked her, do you worry you're going to be cancelled, Holly, after talking to me? She said, I couldn't care less. Is what I think. It's a refreshing listen.
That is very refreshing. Thank you very much indeed, Christopher Hope. I'll be listening to the full podcast later on.
We like people that say what they think, no holds barred.
But it's just a state of our society, isn't it? That people feel like they can't actually say what they think, or they might lose a job, they might lose some friends, they might lose their space on the dinner party circuit.
And it's got worse. Could you imagine a group equivalent to the Spice Girls today saying that they think Margaret Thatcher is girl power? It's almost, that was OK to say in the early 2000s or the 90s or whenever they said it, but it's not OK to say now. It feels like we've got worse as a society on these sorts of issues and these sort of cross-ideological friendships.
I must say I've met Holly and she is very charming indeed. Now, in other news, the King of the Netherlands has teased the Princess of Wales, Kate, following her edited Mother's Day photo. Should we have a little look?
Allemaal hier, fantastisch. Echt waar? Ja. Ik heb hier niet gefotoshopt, eerlijk.
Goodness me. Well, it's a global scandal. The King of the Netherlands? Goodness me.
Yes, he said, at least I didn't Photoshop it.
Yeah, those are the words from the Dutch king. Well, Kate's not the only one in the spotlight, of course. Just before the Princess Diana tribute began last night at a memorial dinner, Meghan Markle launched her lifestyle brand on Instagram. The very same time. Well, was it a coincidence?
Joining us now is royal commentator Jenny Bond. Jenny, I must say I was gobsmacked when I saw this Instagram launch on the same day as the Diana Legacy Award. Do you think this was deliberate timing for maximum coverage or just a coincidence?
Well, I don't see it would be for maximum coverage because there was already one big royal story running, which was the Diana Legacy Awards. I personally don't think it was deliberate on Meghan's part. You know, she'd probably get criticised whenever she launched it because there's a lot of other royal events going on all over the place. And, you know, there's suggestions that it was to upstage William. Well, Harry was very much involved in these awards as well, and I'm sure she didn't want to upstage her own husband. So I think it was just she had to choose the time. She chose that day. And good for her for launching this new venture. It's exactly what she should be doing, I think.
But Jenny, the very fact that her husband, Harry, Duke of Sussex, was involved in this event, she knew precisely that this event was going on, that there was already a lot of news around the fact that Prince William and Prince Harry would not be speaking at the same time, that Prince William would be leaving the venue before Prince Harry phoned in with his satellite message to the gathered people there. It's a stunningly tone-deaf day to launch a new venture, surely.
No, what harm has been done? There's been publicity for her venture. There's been plenty of publicity for the Legacy Award. I don't see what this great conspiracy theory is all about, or all this criticism. Good for her for launching something that is very genuinely her, she says. I think it is her forte, her previous venture, the TIG, her website there, her Instagram account, was a huge success, and I think this will be a huge success. She's a very artistic, clever woman. She wants to make her own money, and this is a very legitimate way of doing it. What's the problem?
Jenny, do you have any problem with the use of the Duchess of Sussex? That's how she is advertising this. So you go onto the Instagram page and it says American Riviera Orchard by Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. Now, of course, she has a right to use that title, but isn't it a little bit jarring that perhaps she's launching something America-focused with the Duchess of Sussex right there? No? Nothing?
I mean, we can pick holes in it if we want to, but I mean, she is the Duchess of Sussex, and she has every right, as you say, to use that title. I do have an opinion, yes, that if they dislike most of what the monarchy is about and royalty, not the monarchy, but royalty is about the royal family, perhaps it would be advisable not to use that title, but it is her right, and obviously it's going to be commercially valuable to her. So it was always going to be, I think.
I just
think we
think
must be
it's
aware of actually just always criticising Meghan, whatever she does.
No, I take that. I take that. I just find it a little bit... It's kind of taking advantage of your links to the royal family, that you chose to leave and you badmouthed. It just seems, for commercial gain. Go it alone. If you're a celebrity in your own right.
You're coming from. Yeah, I know where you're coming from, but honestly, there is so much criticism of Meghan, whatever she does and whenever she opens her mouth, and I think we should be aware of that. We're trying to say that we should lay off Catherine, that we should be kind towards Catherine after a small mistake. Well, we can't have dual standards and be so critical of everything Meghan does and then demand kindness for Catherine.
Well, that's a nice message to start the weekend. Thank you very much indeed, Jenny Bond, royal commentator. There you go, be kind.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair point, actually. I'm just interested about how the two princes wouldn't appear together on stage, virtually or otherwise, and then it was launched at the same time. It just seems like there is this feud.
And I do think they would have had it in the diary, because these launches don't just come overnight, do they? You have it planned for months.
It's the Diana Award. It's the Diana Award.
Well, maybe we've been told, don't be nasty, don't pick holes where there aren't any.
Well, in other news, MP pay rises could top, the MP salary could top £91,400. That's what IPSA, the parliamentary watchdog that delivers the money, has decreed they will get. But do they deserve it? And are they overpaid and work shy? We'll be debating that fiery topic after this.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Now, I'm sure you have seen this video that went viral this week, and if you haven't, well, I think you're going to enjoy it. This is a firefighter leaning on a fence whilst watching a trapped driving instructor's car sink in 4 feet of floodwater. Looks very comfortable there, doesn't he? Just leaning against the fence.
Just chilling, just relaxing. There were there were in fact 2 Essex fire and rescue crews, an ambulance and a police car parked near the sinking vehicle, but they wouldn't enter the water because they had to wait for specialist crews who were trained for the water depth.
2 people who weren't going to sit back and watch were these 2, Jack and Danielle Price, who took it upon themselves to rescue the submerged driver. And Danielle joins us now. Very good morning to you, Danielle, and you are a hero, an absolute hero. What happened in this video? Make sense of it for us.
So we were filming in the area for our YouTube channel, and we've seen the fire brigade come through. I was actually out at 5 o'clock in the morning with my husband, Jamie. We know it always happens there, as you can see, and it was clear. We've seen the fire brigade come through, we've followed them, and they're just standing around as if nothing's happened. In the clip, it says he's fine, he's on his phone, and then sort of walked away. But what they failed to realise is when my partner actually opened the door, as you can hear, he's on the phone to the emergency crew in panic, thinking he's going to sink. So we could not just sit there and watch. He's absolutely terrified.
Yeah, poor bloke. Well done you. Do you reckon this is health and safety gone mad?
It is, because although I do sympathise with them, they are so red-taped, but surely sort of common sense has to kick in as open the door.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Right, well, mixed reviews on what Jenny Bond had to say there about Meghan. You know, are we picking on her by mentioning that this could be deliberate timing to launch her lifestyle brand at the same time as the Diana Legacy
Award?
Award?
Fair to say it's got you talking. Our inbox is bubbling up with many questions, actually. Margaret asks, is Jenny OK? What a lot of rubbish she spoke today. That's not very
Gosh, but Eliza says, well said, Jenny Bond. She's absolutely right. Meghan gets criticised whatever she says or does. It's so hypocritical to give Princess Catherine slack, yet to continually criticise Meghan. Anyone would think she's committed a heinous crime. It's so disproportionate. Eliza, I completely take your point. She does get bullied a lot. But let's remember, she did badmouth the royal family. Quite a bit. And Britain too.
Lisa says there are 364 other days this year this website could have been launched. Oh, sorry, this tacky website could have been launched.
Gosh.
Jenny Bond is just being obtuse, says Lisa. Oof. But there are some people who are saying that...
well, Diana says it's a shame that Meghan could have been a bit kinder too, and whose fault is it that she's criticised? You reap what you sow.
And Linda says something that I might be tempted to agree with. Stop giving Meghan Markle airtime. All you're interested in doing is promoting her, which is precisely what she wants and why she does what she does.
Yeah, you raise a good point. Keep your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com. Jim says, I often find Meghan Markle offensive. Do I have any grounds? So there you go.
And Paula is coming in with the theme of Linda saying, who really cares? With so much going on in the UK, and this garbage takes the top spot. So why don't we return to something a bit more substantial?
Go on,
and that is the issue of MPs' pay, because MPs are going to be given a pay rise this year of 5.5%. John has written in to say, so most of the country's council tax is going up by 5%, and MPs get a pay rise of 5%. Unbelievable.
Yeah, it will cover the council. It will cover the council tax rise for the MPs, I guess.
Well, let's get the views of two very different opinions, because we're going to be debating this issue of MPs' pay. Are MPs work shy and overpaid? Joining us now is the investigations manager at the Taxpayers Alliance, Elliot Keck, and Emma Revel, the external affairs director at the Centre for Policy Studies. Now, Emma, you think MPs are not paid enough?
Well, I think that we shouldn't be as outraged as some people are by the idea of them getting a 5% pay rise. I think it's never going to be a popular opinion when you talk about, you know, what a hard job being an MP is. But at the end of the day, it is a hard job. They have incredibly long hours. They have to be on top of a phenomenal breadth of local, national, international issues. They have to have, you know, 2 offices, of which they obviously have expenses, but they're spending a lot of time away from their families. And that's before you even mention the abuse that MPs get, especially female MPs, and the very real physical threats that many MPs are enduring that, you know, we've been talking about in recent weeks. So I don't think it's unreasonable to have a salary to match the demands of the job.
Emma, how much would you pay them?
Well, personally, I think there is an argument to say we could pay them quite a lot more, substantially more, and significantly scale back the expenses that we give them and say, look, here is the salary, that is the total that you get, and apart from, I would say, personally, travel expenses and staff salaries, everything else you have to pay for out of the salary. I think as well, if you have concerns about MPs taking on second jobs, well, many of them say that they do that, you know, for extra income. If you pay them a bit more, you could potentially consider, you know, more restrictions or even a ban on MPs taking on additional work.
Well, there you go, Elliot Keck. We can solve the extra work issue with more pay for MPs.
I think Emma presents some interesting solutions to the current predicament. It is difficult every single year that you have an independent body proposing pay rises for MPs that aren't decided by MPs themselves. But when we talk about pay rises, generally in society we view pay rises as being linked to performance, or at least they should be linked to performance. And Emma writes very eloquently on her social media and in articles about the absolute disgrace of the housing crisis and about the sluggish growth and millions of people out of work, the surging inflation and the record tax burden. And I think this set of MPs has quite frankly failed the public. I think we have an absolutely terrible economy and terrible social public services. And I don't think that this pay rise is deserved. I don't think this pay rise is justified. And I think MPs should be turning it down.
Emma, they should be paid by performance.
Well, I think that would be incredibly tricky because you're always going to have the opposition say, well, we've done, the government's done a great job. The opposition say, well, no, we haven't. It depends who's winning. You can't say pay rises only for the government, pay rises only for the opposition, depending on how the economy's going or how jobs are going. I am personally quite in favour of linking it to housing. I think that would be a good idea. But how you'd measure it would be quite tricky.
Well, how would we do this, Elliot Keck? You say performance-related pay. Presumably, we can't pay the government a different level that we pay the opposition, or government-supporting MPs the different level that we pay opposition MPs. How would you fix the MP pay situation?
Well, I would argue that good government comes not just from the governing party, but it comes from effective opposition. So, of course, all MPs should be subject to similar pay rises, although there are interesting proposals about whether or not there should be bonuses for serving on committees, tabling questions. For me, the simple way would be GDP per capita. We've seen an absolute failure for the last 10, 15 years to improve the status of the economy and improve people's lives. Actually, pay in the UK is about the same as what it was 15 years ago when you take into account inflation. So I think GDP per capita would be an excellent way of measuring the performance of our MPs.
Well, there you go. We could either pay them for the amount of houses they build or GDP per capita. Those are two good ideas.
Emma, let's take that idea and run with it. Let's say MPs will get paid based on how much the economy grows. I suppose on the one hand, great, we might get growth, but on the other hand, we might get some pretty bad short-termism.
We've already got pretty bad short-termism in a number of ways, and I think the impact that an individual MP of any party can have on the GDP of the nation is very minimal. So I don't necessarily think that's the way to go.
No, OK. Well, what would you suggest then? That just there needs to be this higher wage for MPs because we get low-grade people, because the right people aren't applying to become MPs, aren't standing for election in the first place?
Well, I think part of it is a recognition, as I say, about the level of work involved in the job, the level of difficulty and the level of personal risk, as I say, involved in the job. We also, I think everyone agrees, we want a democracy that is healthy, and that means that people from all walks of life are included. It means that you pay people enough that they can give up other jobs. You want people from lower income backgrounds who can, we've had many Labour MPs, especially in the past, talk about how the salary that they have as MPs is more than anyone in their family has ever earned. And that's a good thing because we want people from those backgrounds to be able to be in Parliament. We started paying MPs back at the turn of the last century because we didn't want parliamentarians who were only the independently wealthy, who could afford to give up high salaries or they had other income to support them while they were an MP. I don't think we want to return to a point where you have to be wealthy to stand to be an MP.
Yes, it's hard to imagine what that would have been like. Emma, sorry, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Elliot, thank you very much. Thank you, Emma Revel, too. Good debate there.
Absolutely. Well, bringing to you much more in just a moment with what I believe to be a fairly exclusive little interview with none other than a former Prime Minister. Yes, Liz Truss will be here on the programme, but that's after your news headlines.
2:33, the top stories from the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister has suffered a blow with another Tory MP announcing he won't run at the next general election. Citing personal reasons, James Heapy says he's standing down to prioritise his family and to pursue a different career. Downing Street says he'll be greatly missed in Parliament. He's also expected to resign as Armed Forces Minister by the end of this month. More than 60 Tory MPs have now announced they're leaving the Commons as speculation mounts over when the general election will be held. The Prime Minister has ruled out the 2nd of May. A £5 million donation from Frank Hester has not yet been given to the Conservatives, with senior party sources telling GB News talks about the funds are still being held. The businessman, who's already given the party £10 million, is accused of being racist after he allegedly said MP Diane Abbott made him want to hate all black women. The Prime Minister's under pressure to return the donation. Millions of pounds worth of drugs and 8 XL bullies have been seized during County Lines raids. Hundreds of weapons were also found, including Rambo knives and machetes. Every police force across the country took part in the raids last week, resulting in more than 1,800 arrests. The Defence Secretary is warning Russia's president not to try it on while he was on a NATO visit in Eastern Europe. GB News was given exclusive access to a training exercise in Poland where British forces are working with their allies, preparing for any possible attack by Russia. It's part of Steadfast Defender, the largest military exercise since the Cold War. Grant Shapps says NATO members are ready and willing to protect themselves from any threat. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Right, it is 2:35 now. You're watching and listening to Good Afternoon Britain. Now Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, is pushing forward with a private members' bill. It's aimed at safeguarding women's-only spaces for biological females.
Well, the bill seeks to define sex in law as biological, and the government could back these proposals from Liz Truss that would bar what she describes as biological males from female-only spaces. But there's been some jiggery-pokery today in the House of Commons and accusations of a filibuster. Well,
filibuster. Well, there you go.
But joining us now from Westminster is our political editor, Christopher Hope, who's with the former Prime Minister, Liz Truss. Chris, take it away.
Tom, Emily, I'm here in Westminster Hall, and Liz Truss, the former Prime Minister, has just left the House of Commons chamber to talk to us right now. Liz Truss, what is your bill meant to do?
Well, what my bill is all about is about protecting children. We know that children are taking puberty blockers, which could damage their development. It could stop them having their own families in the future. And they're doing it because they're being pushed by gender ideology. So what my bill is about is, first of all, being clear that sex means biological sex. It's the sex you are born as. That is how children should be treated until they're 18 and they're old enough to make their own decisions. And what it will mean is it will protect single-sex facilities like toilets, single-sex sports like girls' sports. And I've had a huge number of parents writing to me saying how important this is for them and how worried they are about their children at the moment.
So would your bill force, say, a gym to have an old-fashioned ladies and gents rather than have mixed-sex change rooms and mixed-sex toilets?
Well, first of all, what I want to tell you, Chris, is my bill has been stopped today from being debated by the Labour Party, and I'm absolutely furious about that. They don't even want to talk about the importance of recognising biological sex. They don't want to talk about how we stop children being able to access puberty blockers that would actually stop their development. So they have spent today filibustering my bill and stopping it being talked about, even though over the last few weeks I've had a huge amount of public support from concerned parents, concerned teachers, from young people themselves who want these bills measures put into law.
What kind of things have they been discussing today by avoiding talking about your issue?
Well, they've just been making some very long speeches about tangential issues. They've been told off by the chair for several times for straying off the subject they were meant to be talking about in the first place. And they are clearly running a concerted campaign to stop us talking about this issue in Parliament, even though I know it's of huge concern to the public. You know, we have a situation now where teenagers are taking drugs that could impact their future, irreversible decisions about their own bodies. And of course, I welcome the decision this week by the National Health Service. That's positive. But what about privately available puberty blockers? What if children are getting hold of those? And these are the things that my bill dealt with and would have given the full force of the law, because what children are facing at the moment is motivated ideologues who are there peddling the idea that you can change your sex. The fact is you can't change your sex. We all know that's true. But those children are being peddled a lie. And the fact is the Labour Party are in hock to those extremists rather than caring about the protection of children. I think that's appalling.
If they were here now, they were certainly to deny that. They may think the government's doing measures already to deal with the issue of keeping children safe in mixed-sex change rooms and toilets.
Well, that is simply not the case that the Labour Party think that. They've been very, very fuzzy about what they believe because they are in hock to these ideologues. So what my bill does is absolutely clear in law that sex means biological sex. At the moment, that is being misinterpreted. It's being misinterpreted in our schools. It's being misinterpreted in our universities. And that is why we need the clarity that my bill provides. And Labour aren't even willing to talk about it. They're so scared of the issue. They're so scared of upsetting the extremists in their own party. They're not prepared to do what it takes to actually address the issue. And the reason I brought this bill forward is I heard from mums in my own constituency that their daughters were being forced to share facilities with boys. And those boys were doing things like taking photos of the girls on their mobile phones. And that is a real issue for vulnerable teenage girls. So I believe we have to do something about it. We have to take on the stonewalls of this world who are peddling this ideology, and we have to be clear. Biological sex means biological sex.
What's your next step then? Of course, you're part of the governing party, your former Prime Minister. Will Kemi Badenoch, who's the Equality Secretary, look kindly at what you're doing?
Well, I've had some very positive discussions with Kemi. I'm very hopeful that we can make progress. I'm certainly urging the public to write to their MP to say that they support my bill. I've had a huge response already, but we really need to put pressure on members of Parliament that this is not some esoteric issue. This is something that is affecting teenagers and young people across the country. So I'm hopeful the government will also make progress, but I want the public to really express their opinion and tell the Labour Party what they think of the fact that they spent today filibustering so we couldn't even talk about this issue.
While we've been on air, Kemi Badenoch has tweeted support for your bill, support what you tried to do, and attack Labour for blocking it.
Well, I'm very, very pleased to hear this. I really hope the government will take the measures in my bill forward. But the Labour Party should really hang their heads in shame today for what they've done in stopping a bill that would have actually helped children, helped young people and helped women.
Why do you think the Labour Party has done this, in your view? They're all parents, like you are, like many of us are. Why are they willing not to take the action you're taking? They must be hearing the same thing in their inbox from constituents.
Well, I've had discussions with Labour MPs who privately tell me they agree with me, but they've been told not to support the bill because of their party whips. They're concerned about the pressure from left-wing activists. And that is the problem with the Labour Party, is that over their shoulder, they're looking at the extremist activists, whether it's on gender ideology, whether it's on support for Hamas, and they're afraid to say what they really think. And they're afraid to stand up for the rights of children, and that is very, very concerning.
Well, Liz Truss, thank you for joining us on GBNews today. I've got to ask you one question, the question of the week. You were Prime Minister once. There's not going to be a May 2nd election. Are you relieved?
Look, it's a decision for the Prime Minister when there is an election, but what I think we have seen today is the Labour Party is not fit to govern. They are far more concerned about pursuing and appeasing the far left than they are about protecting the country's children. Thank you.
Liz Truss, thank you. And you heard Tom and Emily, Liz Truss there, the former Prime Minister, furious with the Labour Party for blocking, as she sees it, attempts by her to control and look after these safe spaces for young girls.
Thanks, Christopher. Very interesting indeed to hear from Liz Truss there. Yes,
really
very much taking it to the Labour Party.
And I think it must be said what precisely this filibuster, as it's known, this mechanism by which you talk out other issues in the House of Commons so there isn't time to get on to the next issue in the House of Commons. The Labour Party were using the parliamentary time that could have gone to this bill to talk about ferret name choices.
Yes, that's what Kemi Badenoch just tweeted, which Christopher referred to there. Kemi Badenoch very much on the side of Liz Truss on this one.
Yes, to read out what Kemi said, just now Labour MPs prevented debate on a new law to protect children in single-sex spaces. Instead, they used parliamentary time to discuss ferret name choices.
Yes, I wonder why they were talking about that.
Well, joining us now to digest what has happened in the House of Commons in the last half an hour or so is GB News presenter Benjamin Butterworth. Benjamin, it doesn't really matter where you stand on the side of these questions of single-sex spaces and all the rest of it. This was game-playing and trickery by the Labour Party in the House of Commons today with their filibuster.
Well, I disagree. I think that the real game playing that has been going on here is from the government and the Tory party, because actually there is very little legislation being put forward to Parliament at the moment. It's practically ground to a halt. And so I think the reason why they are trying to emphasise this trans question and these issues which divide Tory MPs, let alone Tory and Labour MPs, is because they want to play a culture war game. They think this is an issue which they can use as a wedge between the voters and the Labour Party, and that's why they're putting it forward at the last minute of the last hour of their time in government.
Well, hang on, this is an issue that a lot of our politicians care deeply about. They're worried about single-sex spaces, they're worried about gender ideology, whether it's in schools or in the NHS or in our legislation. They're worried genuinely about this issue, and it reflects a lot of women's worries in the country, surely.
Well, first of all, polling often finds that most women do not have a problem with transgender people and transgender people using their bathrooms, let alone the population at large. And then if it's the case that it is such a priority and such a truly burning concern of members of the Tory party in Parliament, well, I'd suggest that, after 14 years, they've had a long time to address this. The law that allowed people effectively to access these places, the two laws, the Gender Recognition Act was 2004, and then the Equality Act, the latest version, being in 2010. So the kind of things that are affecting who can access these places and transgender people's lives have been in law for the whole time that the Tories have been in power.
She's right, though, Benjamin. She's right, though, when she says that some members of the Labour Party may be too scared to speak out on this issue if they feel strongly about it. You have had Labour MPs being bullied by trans activists over this very issue. You've had female MPs being bullied.
I mean, there's certainly been some nasty stuff said against Labour MPs of that view, and also very much against people that support these versions of transgender people's rights and right to live their lives. I think it's become a very unedifying debate, and I'm not convinced that Liz Truss or Kemi Badenoch are interested in improving the quality of debate. For example, there was a request recently, a Freedom of Information request, that found that Kemi Badenoch, the Equalities Minister, had failed to meet with any groups representing transgender people while pushing this forward. Now, I think if it were an honest and open debate, then you'd be meeting with people of different views.
Well, if it were an honest and open debate, perhaps they'd be having time to debate it on the floor of the House of Commons, rather than the Labour Party talking about ferrets for too much time. But Benjamin Butterworth, thank you for putting your case across. Really appreciate it.
Yes, we'll be right back. We're going to be discussing the Russian presidential election next. It promises to be a tight race. Does it? Don't go anywhere.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Absenteeism. And parents whose children miss a week or more of school face increased fines in a government drive to tackle absence.
This is another one of those government policies which has done nothing to improve the education of our children. In fact, since this was originally introduced some 10 years ago, the educational standards for our children, the 11-year-olds who can't read when they go up to primary school, have got worse and worse and worse. So it's not working. So what do? They just increase the fine, like that may make it work. Most of the parents who get fined are taking their kids out so they can take them on a holiday before the holiday companies push the prices up. And frankly, as a parent, if I've got a £600 discount on my holiday versus a £60 fine, I'm going to go for the £60
You'll suffer
fine.
the fine.
Yeah.
Let's not forget the other huge absence that children had recently during COVID. Schools were closed for months and months on end. Online learning was really not making up for that. So how could, it's very difficult for the government to say it was fine for us to take your kids out of school for months, but if you take them off for a few days to go to Disneyland, then you are the worst parent ever and you should be...
But also, it's the pandemic that caused some of the problems with absenteeism now.
Absolutely.
Because the mental health issues that some of these children now have.
And there are tens of thousands of children, they call them ghost children, that have simply disappeared from the school register. So it would be nice. It's really, really scary situation. I'm not saying that the government is, taking great measures.
Well, I think one of their plans is to have a national register, which would help with that.
Which would definitely help. But I think they can't deal with the real problem, so they're going after actually perfectly, decent parents who are just taking the odd day off, to save money, frankly.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Right, it's 2:50. You're watching, listening to Good Afternoon Britain, and voting is underway in Russia to choose the next president. Ballots are being filled out over 3 days, even though Vladimir Putin is expected to win easily.
I don't know about that. There are at least 2 other candidates, Emily. But he appealed to voters yesterday, including in annexed parts of Ukraine, to be united in determining his country's future.
Well.
Joining us now is Keir Giles, Senior Consulting Fellow for the Russia and Eurasia Programme at Chatham House. Keir, frankly, it's all a sham, isn't it? I mean, there's nothing democratic about this process.
That's right. One of the most amusing things over the last few days has been watching media describing this, not just in this country, but worldwide, finding a way of saying that Putin isn't definitely going to win. You hear words like almost certain or virtually certain or barring some unforeseen development, although it's hard to see what that could be short of a meteorite obliterating Russia. Yes, Putin is going to be anointed again as the president. It's a mistake, really, to call these elections because that implies that there is some kind of choice. And it's just one of the ways that Russia is more and more resembling the old Soviet Union. They had elections there, too, even though there was only one choice on the ballot paper.
But, Keir, we've got Nikolai Kharitonov, Leonid Slutsky and Vladislav Davankov.
There you go, Keir. Leonid Slutsky. What a wonderful choice.
Leonid Slutsky, wonderful character from what's been known for a long time as the Liberal Democratic Party of Russia, although everything they stand for is the exact opposite of any of those words. The interesting thing about these people, from the point of view of if you assume that there's some kind of democratic competition, is that they all endorse Putin. Now, Nikolai Kharitonov, the Communist Party candidate, so-called, was actually buttonholed by Steve Rosenberg, the BBC correspondent in Moscow, and said, well, why would you be a better choice than Putin? And he wouldn't say. He wouldn't actually say why he's any different. And he said he hopes Putin will continue to lead the country. It is, as you said, a sham. It's just a performance, a piece of performance art that some Russia analysts think Putin needs in order to give himself some kind of validation and to show that he's supported, even though people really don't have a choice.
I think which I should just explain. We're looking at Siberian dancers at a polling station. It's quite curious imagery there.
Makes voting fun.
But Keir, you're saying that these other candidates on the ballot have effectively all endorsed Putin. What's happened to the candidates that were going to be on the ballot that refused to endorse Putin?
Well, Boris Nadezhdin was a candidate who actually opposes one of Putin's policies, which is practically unheard of. He stands against the war on Ukraine. And he's trying to gathering the signatures that you need as part of the process of becoming a presidential candidate. As soon as it became clear that actually there were quite a few people in Russia who support that idea, he was ruled out and the signatures were declared invalid. So nobody who is actually going to mount a challenge to what Putin wants is going to be allowed to stand in this election.
And Keir, just very quickly, how will Putin celebrate? Does he have a victory party planned? What sort of thing does he do?
I'm sure he's got it all very well planned out, but we probably won't be invited.
Probably not. Thank you very much for your time. Really great to speak to you. Keir Giles there, Senior Consulting Fellow for the Russia and Eurasia Programme. That's all from us.
That is, but Martin Daubney will have a lot on his show, not least on the unfolding events in Parliament, that sensational news that we broke with Liz Truss on this programme. Martin, what have you got coming up?
Well, I was very much enjoying your Siberian dancers there, a bit sort of Gangland style. That got me going. But I've got an exclusive interview with an Oldham councillor whose attempts to table a motion, an investigation into the grooming ring scandal in Oldham was denied by a council meeting, filibustered by two things. First, a half-hour break for Ramadan snacks, and secondly, by a half-hour motion to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. This is odd. Oldham Council. Will it speak exclusively to him? Also, the latest on that Liz Truss scandal, sticking up for girls in toilets, Labour denying her that. We'll also talk about politics. Is it time for celebrities like Holly Valance to rack off or get stuck in? All that coming up on the Martin Daubney Show, 3 till 6 p.m. But first, time for your latest weather forecast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, I'm here with your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Today's showers are largely going to ease as we go through later today, taking us into a bit of a chilly night because the low pressure centre that has brought some blustery and showery weather today is clearing away towards the northeast with a bit of a ridge of high pressure building from the west. Yes, there will still be some showers as we go through the end of the afternoon, particularly across eastern parts, but turning drier and clearer from the west, and with clear skies and a bit of a northerly wind, we're likely to see our temperatures dropping tonight. It will be chillier than it has been through some recent nights. Could dip just a bit below freezing across northern parts, a touch of frost possible. Elsewhere, there may be a few pockets of mist and fog. Otherwise, though, Saturday gets off to a fine start for many areas, and across the north and east, we're going to hold on to the blue, sunny skies through much of the day. But in the south and west here, it will turn increasingly cloudy, and there'll be some wet weather at times too, with something a bit more persistent and heavy rain-wise pushing into Northern Ireland later. Temperatures will be lifting as we go through the day, so after a chilly start, we should see highs quite widely in the low to mid-teens Celsius. Wet weather then pushes its way through as we go through Saturday night into Sunday, clearing away towards the east, and so Sunday itself actually looks largely dry for many places, albeit with a scattering of showers, and there'll be some strong winds too. Monday should be mostly dry, just a few showers to watch out for before some more rain arrives on Tuesday. That's it for me. I'll see you later.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We've got cash, treats and a spring shopping spree to be won in a great British giveaway. You could win an amazing £12,345 in tax-free cash. Plus, there's a further £500 of shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. We'll also give you a gadget package to use in your garden this spring. That includes a games console, a pizza oven and a portable smart speaker, so you can listen to GB News on the go. For another chance to win the vouchers, the treats and £12,345 in tax-free cash, text GBWIN to 84902. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB03 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday the 29th of March. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if watching or listening on demand. Good luck.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task. This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.